Hey everyone, Meet Kevin. Welcome back to another episode of the Meet Kevin Show. Today is not a day you want to refresh your portfolio if you're invested in Bitcoin. And last week wasn't a great day for refreshing your portfolio if you're invested in Tesla. And so what I decided to do today is see if I could get somebody who is so dedicated to this space, both Tesla and Bitcoin, on to talk about their thoughts. And Warren Redlich is somebody who's just on it when it comes to his analysis. And I really respect good fundamental analysis. And when I watch his videos, I'm just blown away with the level of detail that he goes into. And so I am honored to have Warren on the channel. Welcome aboard, Warren, to talk about Bitcoin and Tesla.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So tell us, first of all, what the heck is going on? Why is Sunday supposed to be a chill day? Why am I waking up with the Bitcoins in the toilet?
So I think when you have assets like this that are somewhat volatile, you're going to have ups and downs. I don't think the current ups and downs are terribly meaningful. I don't know how it compares to 6 months ago. I think it's still way up from that. And I think a long-term investor doesn't worry about short-term ups and downs. Same thing with Tesla, same thing with a lot of stocks.
Nice. Do you think there's a particular reason this is happening at Bitcoin, or is this just, it sells off a little bit after we get euphoria? Did Elon Musk trigger this, or what is this?
Well, there's one thing is animal spirits. I think that's John Maynard Keynes. Maybe it's Adam Smith. I get confused about my economist, but there's some sort of thing that the markets just go up and down. And there's reasons that you see explained, well, interest rates are going up and that affects things this way. I actually think Bitcoin is, at least in the short term, poised to go up. Not in the short term, in the medium term. Tesla's decision to buy Bitcoin was a start. If other companies follow, if Apple says, okay, we'll buy $5 billion of Bitcoin, if a few other large companies start buying Bitcoin as a share of their portfolio, even a small share, it's a signal of more acceptance, and it's a greater steady demand on Bitcoin. And I think it could go up a lot more, but there's long-term issues with Bitcoin that we'll see.
Well, tell me about those. What are those long-term issues?
Governments don't like Bitcoin, and people who are dedicated crypto believe that cryptocurrencies are immune to government interference, and all you have to do is look at XRP and Ripple. The SEC went after XRP and Ripple tumbled.
Wow. And what way? So I really started my whole crypto deep diving with Bitcoin, and I feel like I'm still in the Bitcoin deep dive. I feel like I leave my deep dives when I feel really comfortable in something, and I'm not there yet on Bitcoin in terms of being fully done. And so what I mean to say with that is I haven't done much research on Ethereum. I know we've got smart contracts. I know they say there's more speed maybe there. This other one, Ripple, clueless. Can you, for somebody who doesn't even know what you just said, maybe explain what was this, what was the promise, and what happened?
I believe XRP was the third largest cryptocurrency by market cap after Ethereum. And nice. It had the advantage of fast transaction speed, low transaction costs. It was closely tied to a company named Ripple, and the SEC sued Ripple, maybe some others, in relation to this, and into the way Ripple started up XRP. Claiming a variety of things. I read through the complaint, just background, I'm an attorney. It's not my area of law, but I'm an attorney. I can at least read legal documents and sort of understand them. And as I read the arguments the SEC made in their lawsuit against Ripple, same arguments could be made if the SEC decided to sue Coinbase for the same, a lot of the same arguments would apply. And that's why I think Bitcoin's long-term danger is, number one, they are vulnerable in the same way Ripple and XRP were vulnerable. And then there's a lot of noises from governments. Janet Yellen has been critical of Bitcoin for a couple months now. So if the government decides to go after cryptocurrencies, they could tumble. I still think they're a great thing. I worry that governments can damage them.
Now you just mentioned something that this is going to sound like a total tangent, but are you the guy with the postcards and the drive-through, the DUI checkpoints?
It's a flyer. Yes, I'm the fair DUI guy. Yes, the fair DUI
That's
lawyer.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh.
Got myself arrested.
I was a police explorer for 3 years, and I would watch your videos, And at the police department where I was an explorer for, we're like, what do we do if this happens?
Yes,
that was awesome.
Actually, when this was breaking in 2015, we caught a bunch of emails because Florida has an open public records law. We received a bunch of emails going back and forth between law enforcement agencies and prosecutors. How are we going to deal with it? It was comical because there were like 5 of us across the state doing this. No one else was doing it. There's no point in worrying about us because none of us were drunk, right? We were doing this to test the checkpoints, but they're so insistent on protecting their power that it's more important to arrest somebody who's not drunk than it is to arrest somebody who is drunk. That's my take on that.
That's hilarious. Okay, well, the connection is really cool. So thank you for that. Okay, so but I want to talk about this XRP. What were the arguments that were so compelling that made basically XRP collapse? And that could also be a threat to maybe Coinbase, you mentioned.
Sure. So the key arguments. One key argument was not connected to Bitcoin, which was how it was formed. That Ripple was doing things like paying off exchanges to host XRP on their exchange. That was a specific issue that I don't think you could tag Bitcoin with, or Ethereum. I don't think Ethereum is vulnerable in that way. But a number of the other arguments are basically this is really a security and it needs to be regulated like a security. That's the critical issue. If you decide that Bitcoin, that Ethereum need to be regulated like a security instead of treated like a currency, and even if you treat it like a currency, governments don't like competing currencies. They want their currency to be dominant. And if the government decides to go after it, the courts are probably going to back it. And that's the United States. Then, what if China decides they don't like it? The Chinese government really doesn't matter what, if the Chinese government says you're out, you got a problem. And, arguably China's already the biggest economy in the world.
And they're developing their own digital coin, their central bank coin.
That's another big issue is, does anybody really want to? I think you have to ask this question, what's special about cryptocurrency? And one of the things that was special about Bitcoin when it first came out was it wasn't controlled by government. Do you want a cryptocurrency that is controlled by government? You're just giving up. And this is why, that one of the things that government is using that I think hampers Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is something called Know Your Customer regulations, KYC, anti-money laundering. There's this fictional crime called money laundering. And just for background, I'm a libertarian. Libertarians believe that money laundering is a fictional crime. But it's an effort to control us. There's no anti-money laundering laws. There are laws about cash, if you have dollar bills in your hand, but it's much harder to regulate dollar bills because we can just meet somewhere and exchange cash. And even at a store, you can't really regulate that in the same way. But once Amazon or Overstock starts taking Bitcoin, then government can say, hey, wait a minute, we're going to monitor how you use this. They can't really do it with cash at a storefront.
Interesting. Okay, so that potential intervention where obviously it now gets regulated more, but obviously that it would seem like it would create some complications because again, the point of investing in Bitcoin is that lack of government intervention. But what would the downside be?
The downside number one, what the advantages of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are privacy in your transactions is one big advantage. And it's the same thing as cash. If I do a cash transaction with you out on the street, it's private. No one knows we have the transaction. Bitcoin was designed to ensure that kind of privacy. And the other thing is governments hate cryptocurrencies. Look what the US government is doing right now with the dollar. They're printing like crazy. If you Google M1 Fred, you will find a graph showing basically a hockey stick where they're just the line of money printing went vertical in 2020 and it hasn't changed. And cryptocurrency, the great advantage of Bitcoin is they can't print more. It's a very, very limited growth to the currency. Same thing with Dogecoin, same thing with XRP, same thing with the Ethereum. There's some sort of practical limit. There's no limit on the amount of money government can print. And if you're government and you want to print money, you don't want a competing currency. So I think that's the biggest danger. Same thing, I think the biggest threat to Tesla is government. I think the biggest threat to Bitcoin is government.
Interesting. I don't know, maybe I have a different opinion on the future of Bitcoin, but I've never really thought of Bitcoin as something that would replace the dollar or become sort of a monetary device for a country. I've always thought of it as something that can be used as a currency, but more as an investment into the number one cryptocurrency, essentially. Is there really a downside if it doesn't become this monetary system? Are there a lot of people investing in this because they believe it's going to be the dollar replacement?
So Bitcoin itself is not great as a cryptocurrency because the speed with which the blockchain updates, I could be wrong, I think it's either every 15 or every 30 minutes. That was a great advantage of Ripple, was I don't know, every 10 or 15 seconds the blockchain would update.
Oh, wow.
Bitcoin has some things that people don't know about Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a particular value as a currency in this context. If there's a concept called remittances, you are from Latin America and you come up and you get a job in America and you want to send money home. And in the old days, you had to use Western Union. It was clunky. It was high fees. And now with Bitcoin, people are able to send money home using Bitcoin, and it's a much more efficient, much faster transaction. It's easier. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it doesn't have its flaws. But as a currency in other contexts, like buying from a store, it's a little clunky because of that speed of the blockchain update. You have to have some kind of kludge to make it work, where Ethereum, Ripple, XRP, some other cryptocurrency might come along. Dogecoin, I don't know. I don't have any. The only currency of the currencies I own is Bitcoin, and I only own a little. But I have tried to do transactions with Bitcoin, and if you're working with an established provider like Coinbase or Cash App or something like that, it is pretty straightforward. But when you get into private wallets, it's a little different.
This kludge, is that like an intermediary, somebody who collateralizes the bridges the 10-15 minutes?
Yeah, I used to do cash transactions with Bitcoin. There is a website called localbitcoins.com that facilitated, you would arrange to meet someone somewhere and exchange Bitcoin for cash, and they sort of served as an intermediary. They were like an escrow for the transaction. Wow. You could do the transaction with them and they would make sure it followed through the blockchain. You had your cash, they had their Bitcoin, and you could walk away. Otherwise, you would have to wait 15 minutes to be sure that the blockchain updated correctly.
Oh my gosh, because I suppose it could invalidate a transaction while it is still in the verifying stage.
Right. And I think, and the other thing, look, if you're doing a transaction with Amazon and Amazon tells you, okay, it's good, then you're probably okay. If Cash App tells you your transaction is good, you're probably okay. I don't think it's really an issue once you have that extra layer, but that's not the core layer of how Bitcoin works. And this is, I'm not claiming I'm a Bitcoin expert. That's just my opinion of it.
Now, is this, look, when you start talking about local Bitcoin and exchanging Bitcoin for cash, you've been looking into Bitcoin way longer than I've been looking into Bitcoin. I think that's really cool. But I'm curious, isn't it possible to, I don't know, speed this up? Like, can't we change, what do they call it? The forks, have a fork in Bitcoin and change the way this speed works and do what Ethereum does? That's
where you're stretching my expertise. I believe there are talks about some kind of fork with Bitcoin. I thought there was also something about their transaction volume, how much volume they could handle. There are limitations with Bitcoin. That's one of the reasons why Ethereum is doing well. I believe Ethereum may have gone up more than Bitcoin. I think that's why XRP Ripple was such a good cryptocurrency, was offering something different. And I think there's a lot of talk about Bitcoin forking and creating some alternative way of doing things, but will it happen? That's over my head.
Yeah. So, what about why no Ethereum for you? Why not do like the 60-40 balance people talk about between Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Honestly, it's not my focus. I'm a lot more interested. One of the things that I see people talking about Bitcoin fundamentals, and I don't believe the cryptocurrencies have fundamentals. Right. I'm actually a lot more excited about things like Tesla and SpaceX. I'm wearing a Tesla T-shirt right now.
Oh, love it.
That's the Berlin Gigafactory. I'm a lot more excited about companies that are making things that are changing the world in a material way. I do think cryptocurrencies are important, and they could deliver a lot of change and make life better for a lot of people. I just think governments are more likely to get in the way, and we're still waiting for somebody to come up with a cryptocurrency that's really easy for the regular person to use. Like, I'm comfortable using it. There's a lot of technically sophisticated people who are comfortable using it, but my in-laws, my mother, my wife is not going to use Bitcoin or Ethereum or how are you going to extend that to regular people using it on a regular basis? And I think we're a long way from that. And I'm not sure we're going to get there. That doesn't mean it's not good. That doesn't mean it's not useful, but we'll see.
But you're still investing in it, and you would just keep your funds there, or buy and hodl, or is this something you'd sell at some point?
This is actually a little bit funny. So I've accumulated a little bit of Bitcoin over the years, and about 2 years ago, I decided, okay, I think I'm just going to sell it. And then I never got around to doing it. And I made about $40,000 by not selling it by accident. So I made about $40,000 in Bitcoin by accident. And, all along the way, I was acquiring Bitcoin and it was growing in value. And I was buying things, I was cashing it out, buying a little, getting a little more. I was just doing these little transactions here and there. And because certain services, people wanted Bitcoin was a good way of doing it. And, probably at my peak, I had 3 Bitcoins. And, you always go back and say, if I had held on to all 3 Bitcoins, right? But, that's the world changes in that way. So personally, if I thought about it, if I was like really motivated, yeah, I'd probably buy some, but I would have bought XRP and then I would have lost a ton of money. So
got it.
I'm just sitting on the Bitcoin and watching it grow and laughing.
Got it. So what about then Tesla and buying Bitcoin? Why are they buying Bitcoin? And is this good or is it bad?
I think it's not very important for Tesla. This was about 0.2% of Tesla's market cap when they made the move. So why people freaked out and Wall Street freaked out about Tesla putting 0.2% of your market cap into Bitcoin? I think it was 8% of their cash on hand. And then it turned out that when they announced it, they had made about $1 billion in growth on Bitcoin. It's probably down a little bit to $500 million or something, but their stake in Bitcoin grew. But so this was, by any standard, this would be good news, right? We bought something and it went up $500 million in value,
right?
But Wall Street has this sort of like crazed view that everything's wrong if you don't do what we think is right. So that
very non-traditional.
Yeah, it's not. But so there's a practical side of it, which is number one, it could boost Bitcoin if you're the leader on something like this, and then others follow, and then it grows because Apple buys some Bitcoin, and like I said, if that happens, then Bitcoin goes to 100,000, Bitcoin goes to 200,000, and then Tesla made a huge amount of money on that investment. The other thing is, look, when you're holding $20 billion in cash, it's not growing, it's arguably losing value. So putting it in something other than cash makes sense. But again, I don't focus my valuation of Tesla on how much cash they have on hand or whether it's in Bitcoin or bonds or stock. I care about what they're doing as a business, and this is a small detail for the company.
Is it possible, though, that other businesses will look at Tesla's investment into Bitcoin and say, oh, wow, okay, they invested in a Bitcoin, it went up. Then Elon tweeted, wow, seems high, and it loses, $10,000, $12,000 a coin. Doesn't this maybe just seem like it's Elon's game or pet toy or something like that,
Wow.
that it's not serious? And isn't this latest volatility just actually going to discourage companies? Go, why do I care about this?
I don't know why anybody ever thought Elon was serious about anything he says on Twitter. I mean, sometimes he's serious, but if you take his, there are people who are upset about his Dogecoin tweets. Who cares? He's just joking around. You never know when he's serious. Sometimes he is serious. If he's answering a question about Tesla and what they're going to do with the Cybertruck, he's usually serious about that. But if he's tweeting about Dogecoin or Bitcoin or whatever, there's a really strong chance he's just kidding around. And it's not something that if you're, the idea of Bitcoin being a joke has been around a lot longer than Elon Musk. And Dogecoin was started as a joke.
Yeah, true. That was actually supposed to be a joke. Yeah, that's incredible. So, well, then tell me where's Elon serious, and where are you putting your money? Are you all in on Tesla, or is it a part of your portfolio? How does it look percentage wise?
It's 85% of my retirement portfolio, my largest account, and I manage a couple of family portfolios that are around 50%. They're not mine, so I have fiduciary obligations to not be so insanely overinvested in one company, but they're about 50%. So
you're bearish.
Yeah, I am. No, I'm like a Tesla Super Bowl. I believe that almost any valuation I see from anyone else is massively underestimating where Tesla is going to run to. Tesla is going to grow insane. So here's the simplest thing. Okay. Tesla said on Battery Day, we're going to make 3 terawatt hours of batteries in 2030.
Yes, they did. And
it's going to be a supplement to the batteries they buy from suppliers, LG Chem, Panasonic, CATL, whoever else sells the batteries. Right. Supplement means the other providers are going to provide more. But if you just say,
too.
Right. No, and CATL, if you follow the news, CATL, LG Chem, and Panasonic are all scaling. They're all building the 4680 cell format that Tesla talked about. So if you go out to 2030 and you say, okay, they're going to sell products containing 6 terawatt hours of battery cells. And you look back and you say, well, currently Tesla makes about $600 a kilowatt hour in revenue on their batteries. It works out to about $4 trillion in revenue in 2030. Let me say that again. Yeah. It works out to about $4 trillion in revenue in 2030. Put any multiple on that. Put any same multiple on that, and it's a $20 trillion company.
What do you have here? So 6 terawatts. I'm trying to figure out how many kilowatts that is. That's 6 trillion.
6 trillion watts. So it's 6 million
watts.
6 million kilowatts.
I see. Okay, so 6 million kilowatts.
Kilowatt hours, to be clear. 6 million kilowatt hours.
Right. And then what was your cost that you threw onto the kilowatt?
6 billion kilowatt hours. 6
billion.
billion.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is it? Yeah,
it's 6 billion kilowatt hours. A typical,
this is 9 zeros.
Right.
Yeah, 9 zeros.
a Tesla Model 3 has a 50 kilowatt hour pack. So if you have 6 billion kilowatt hours, you divide that by 50, and you end up with 300 million vehicles, which I'm not predicting they're going to make 300 million vehicles. I don't want to, I want people to understand you can't make 300 million vehicles. The batteries are going to go into other products like energy storage, power walls, mega packs. But if they achieve that level, and they're saying the world needs 20 terawatt hours of battery production in 2030. So they're still only calling themselves at 30% market share of whatever markets they're in.
And I honestly, I think that's going to grow even more substantially than their estimates are. I mean, to me, especially in sunny climates, there's no reason for every house not to have solar, a complete roof of solar. It doesn't have to be the solar roof. It's a little expensive. We can talk on that. I think it's overpriced. Sure. Maybe that's the real estate investor in me. I think the panels are great, do a good job. Solar efficiency still sucks. It's 21% or something like that. But even that, it can save you money.
Sure,
you put up battery packs in, and now you offset your peak usage. It's so juicy. Everyone should have it.
Let's just be clear about the real estate perspective. You are correct if you have an asphalt shingle roof. That solar roof is expensive. I have a concrete tile roof in my house. My neighborhood requires it. We have a quote. We ordered a Tesla solar roof. We have a quote for a new roof on our house that would be about $36,000. And my neighbor was $38,000. The solar roof is coming in at $38,000, but you get a tax credit and you save $200 a month on your electric bill. So
the concrete, when you compare it to concrete, those 50 to 70-year roofs, you're right. You nailed it. I should have clarified that. Comp shingles, the little cheapies that blow away in a hurricane for like $9,000. You're right. Good point. So I'm looking at this math here. So I'm doing 6 billion kilowatt hours. Divided by 100 because I think the packs are going to go to 100. And it's also a little bit easier. This is also true. So I get 60 million units.
60 million Model S's. 60 million Tesla Model S's.
Sure. And I imagine even they could probably at some point put these into the $25,000 vehicle, maybe, or do you think they might use a smaller pack? Either way, well, if we go with that, 60 million vehicles. Even if you took half of that, like you said, for cars, 30 million cars, here I am when I run my projections, I'm talking like 5 million maybe in 2025 and 6.
Sure. So let's go to 2022.
Okay.
2022 is not far away. 2022, they projected 100 gigawatt hours of battery production supplemental to their suppliers. That's a much closer in time thing we can take a look at. So if you do 100 gigawatt hours of batteries they produce, and let's say they buy 100 gigawatt hours of batteries from suppliers. So I think it's going to be more. I think they're going to get 150 from suppliers, but let's call it 200 total. 200 gigawatt hours, which is 200,000 megawatt hours, right? And there's
I got to do the math. 200 gigawatt hours?
200 gigawatt hours works out to 200,000 megawatt hours, and there's 10 Model S's in a megawatt hour. So it's 2 million Model S's. The average Tesla vehicle is probably going to be 50 kilowatt hour pack instead of 100 kilowatt hour pack. So you're really talking about 4 million vehicles in 2022. So just 2022. That's if they only make vehicles. The reality is they're going to make power walls. They're going to make mega packs. But in theory, if it was only batteries, and the 2023 vehicle, the Tesla Compact that they talked about on Battery Day, that's probably going to use a smaller than 50 kilowatt hour pack. I think that's going to use a 40 kilowatt hour pack, or maybe even 30. It's going to be a hyper efficient vehicle. They're going for low cost. It's probably going to use lithium iron phosphate cells because they're less expensive.
Cheaper.
And because, they're less expensive and they actually have better cycle life. They have other advantages. You can charge them to full without worrying about it, where with nickel-based cells, you can't charge them to full as often because you reduce battery life. There's a whole bunch of advantages to it, but you're just going to see where the future we're heading to is really, really bright. And just to be clear, Elon said 20 million. When we talked about 2030, Elon said 20 million vehicles in 2030. So 30 million is not that big of a stretch.
The lithium iron phosphate batteries, they used to have a bad reputation for even fires. They've gotten a lot better, and they're used a lot now in China. I think they're used almost exclusively at the Tesla Shanghai facility. Do you think that we're going to start either importing those or making essentially those cheaper batteries here alongside the 4680s?
Sure. So just to be clear, I believe it's lithium ion, not lithium iron. Lithium ion batteries had a reputation for catching fire. I don't think iron phosphate cells had a reputation for catching on fire. And even if they did, currently their reputation is that they're more stable, that they generate less heat. They are less energy dense. And the biggest flaw of iron phosphate is it takes up a lot more volume for the same charge, and it takes up a lot more weight for the same charge. So especially in a vehicle application, ideally you would like higher energy density and higher volume density so that you take up less space and you weigh less, so the car runs more efficiently. But they've gotten so good at making vehicles efficient. Now, as far as 4680, there's a little trick there. I believe that all battery cells that are going to be used in Teslas in the future will be the 4680. That's actually I have a model handy. I have a model handy. This is a 4680
cell. Did you 3D print that?
No, a friend of mine 3D printed it. This is the tabless architecture. Fred Jessup, I think it was Fred Jessup that sent me this. I hope I got that right. So, cool. Should I put it back on the screen? Well, anyway, so the 4680 cell is a size. You could put whatever chemistry works inside of it. So I believe they're going to put high nickel cells in it at Tesla. Panasonic and LG Chem are going to put nickel manganese cells in it, which will be slightly less energy dense, but still very competitive, but cost less and enable you to spread the nickel over more cells. And CATL, I think, is going to make that an iron phosphate. And iron phosphate is it's a workhorse. If you're think about this, if you're doing like a Powerwall or a Megapack, you don't care about weight and volume, because you're just putting it somewhere. If you're putting it in a car, it matters that it's energy dense, especially with Tesla Semi, which really needs high-end batteries.
Right. Well, so I had a local solar installer that doesn't do Tesla, but they do, all the other ones, mostly Enphase. They complained about the Tesla Powerwall, saying, these are inexpensive batteries they use. It's like putting a car battery on the side of your house. It's risky. It's cheap components, fire risk, cladded up with a nice skirting. Are they just being salesy?
I haven't heard of an incident with a Tesla Powerwall yet. I agree with something though. The idea is you're going to be putting inexpensive cells in Powerwall. This is one of the things I'm working on, a model that I'm probably going to publish next week or the week after. I do models of Tesla. This is where I come up with my Super Bowl numbers. So,
those are big numbers, man.
Yes, but it's one thing I haven't tried to figure out yet, and I'm working on now, is how profitable will Powerwall and Megapack be? And if you think about it, a Powerwall has 13.5 kilowatt hour pack. Call it 15 kilowatt hours. And I believe the future LFP cells will cost around $40 a kilowatt hour. Right now, they're probably around 60, but as they improve things, that'll get down to around $40 a kilowatt hour. So you're talking about $600 of cells in the Powerwall, and that's the primary component that costs money, because everything else is a steel case and some electronics. Mass produce them, it gets cheap. So figure $1,000 for the cost. They sell it for $7,500. What's the margin? $6,500 on. Excuse me.
No worries.
So
that's the one place. Oh, go ahead, dude. Sorry.
No, and so Megapack, I worked out that Megapack, the cost of a Megapack in terms of to Tesla is going to be in the ballpark of $150,000. They sell it for $750,000 and $900,000. The margins are huge on energy. Once you scale, you have to scale first. Once they start producing them in volume, once they start working on production efficiencies, which they haven't really kicked in. I have an inside source gave me some information about all this. This is where I'm coming from. They really haven't pushed to scale Powerwall and Megapack yet, because the batteries, they're so busy putting the batteries in cars, because the car business is where they started. But once they have enough battery supply to really expand Megapack and Powerwall, you're going to see the volumes of those go up, and you're going to see the margins go up like crazy.
Yeah, that's something where I see Tesla is heavily undervalued, is in the energy space. The solar panels, in my opinion, they do the solar subscription, where if you want to, not on the roof, but on the panels, if somebody watching right now, for example, they could get sign up for solar panels on their house for like $60 a month or something like that. It's really incredible. Cancel anytime, right? Which sounds like a sales pitch, but it is. I mean, it's incredible. But what my thinking is that those panels are almost like the loss leader Trojan horse to get people into the high margin products like the power walls that you're talking about. Personally, I think the margin on the energy division, which maybe right now sits at like 10%. I think the panels lose and the
they lose money on it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that segment, I mean, we could see margins on those power walls in excess of 30%. We could have higher margins there than in the auto space, almost with certainty, I feel.
So I think that margins on Powerwall and Megapack will actually be over 50% once they scale. But margins on vehicles, if FSD goes live, once FSD goes live, once you head into the robotaxi world, I think the margins on that approach 90%.
Oh my gosh. On the software, right, exactly.
Yeah.
The vehicles themselves. People laugh at Tesla for their margins, how, oh, there's no way Tesla's going to get to, 28, 30% margins. Generally, their margins have just been on this uptrend. How can they though, I mean, they're burning the candle at both ends of the stick here. How can they lower the price of the car but also increase their margin? Can you comment on that a bit?
Sure. So you come down to this question. What is a self-driving car worth? So Elon has talked about a self-driving car driving, 5 times as much. I think he's actually sandbagging there. Imagine you had a robotaxi that was driving from 6 a.m. to midnight, and it drives about 300 miles a day, about 100,000 miles a year. And let's say it charges $1 a mile, which Uber and Lyft charge $2.50 a mile roughly. That's what it roughly costs the consumer to use Uber and Lyft. So $1 a mile. When you get the cost of your robotaxi down to the point where it's costing you less than 10 cents a mile, and then you figure you're occupied really more than 50% of the time, I call it 50% of the time, you're making, let's say, 50 cents a mile profit on your vehicle. 50 cents a mile times 100,000 miles is $50,000 a year profit on the vehicle for 10 years. So you make a vehicle for let's say Tesla owns its own robotaxi, and the $25,000 vehicle they talked about only cost them $20,000 to make, and they run it as their own robotaxi for 10 years, making $50,000 a year. They make $500,000 in profit on a $20,000 investment. What's the margin on that?
Yeah, right. Do you think that Tesla will operate their own network or just enable their customers to do that? And if their customers are enabled to do that, everybody's just going to have their car robo-taxiing around. And wouldn't that then drive down costs? Because, the competitive nature of capitalism will always lead to this equilibrium.
Price will eventually fall, but it's going to take a while to scale enough robo-taxis to fill the market demand. But Elon said at Autonomy Day, they would probably have a fleet of 10 million vehicles. So if you figure 10 million vehicles making $50,000 a year in profit, he said 30,000 a year in profit, but you add up those numbers, that's a lot of money. That's a lot. That's $300 billion. If you do $30,000 a year profit, like he said, on 10 million vehicles, that's $300 billion a year in profit. Those are simple numbers.
Yeah. So, I mean, what about, there are going to be competitors, right? There's GM has the Cruise division for autonomy. You've got Mobileye autonomy, Qualcomm, NVIDIA. Tesla's not going to be the only one with robotaxis. How are you building competition into your models?
I do not believe there's going to be significant competition in the near future. And, Cruise is an example. I have a video where I have fun with Cruise.
Tell me.
None of the guy's driving into the trees. He says it drives like a 13-year-old. It drives like a teenager. It's not competitive. They're not competitive even close. But there's a fundamental problem. Eventually, other people will nail full self-driving. They'll get autonomy down. The problem is, what Elon says is it's not the self-driving that's going to be the long-term advantage. It's the manufacturing. If your autonomy solution is a $150,000 vehicle that lasts 150,000 miles, you're at $1 a mile just on depreciation of the vehicle, not including interest. Sure. If Tesla delivers a $20,000 vehicle that will do 1 million miles, then it's 2 cents a mile in depreciation on the car, not including interest. And you can't compete price-wise until you deliver. That's why you have to manufacture. That's one of the, when it's Lucid, whether it's Lucid Motors or it's GM or Volkswagen talking about, if you look at all the vehicles that the supposed competition is coming, people are delivering, they're trying to come up with something that's close to the 2018 Model 3. And by 2024, we're going to have a vehicle that's almost as good as the 2018 Model 3, at which point Tesla will be mass producing the 2023 Tesla Compact that they'll be making 10 million of them a year. That'll cost $20,000 for them to make. So there's so many different levels to what Tesla is doing. It's the software, and if let's suppose Tesla has delivered full self-driving and they've got it down really safe, and then GM says, hey, we've got ours, or Waymo says we've got ours. How safe are you going to feel safer, or as safe, or even safe at all in one of these other vehicles if Tesla has already delivered a safe thing that has proven itself with billions of miles?
Sure.
The hurdle of getting in there and persuading somebody to get into your self-driving car. Well, why would I take your car when I have this one?
And you still have a substantial amount of public resistance to even just Teslas in general. I feel like there's. Maybe it certainly is anecdotal, but I feel like there's a massive population that still believes, oh, Tesla, no, that's just, that's not for me. I'm going to go buy the Prius. I'm going to go buy, some traditional car or whatever. To me, I see that as a massive opportunity, but isn't it possible, though, that that's also a risk? I mean, your average buyer for a Tesla is between 25 and 45, and 80% of them are dudes. How are we going to get women? How are we going to expand this market share? Isn't this a risk factor?
No, I don't see that as the reality is that any new product grows and it spreads by people. What's really special about Tesla is they don't advertise on TV. They're not advertising on the Today Show to try to get the 45 to 65 female demographic, right? They're not doing that. They sell great products to consumers. And listen, it's funny, in the Tesla community, there are people like, oh, you just have to drive it once. Well, I've driven a Model 3. I've driven a Model Y. It was good. Yeah. Was it that much? To me personally, I didn't think it was that, once you turn on autopilot, that's good, right? That's like, wait, I can't believe it's doing this. But overall, it's a car. Right, I used to be a high performance. Like I would drive fast in places I shouldn't, But now I'm an old man and I just want to get somewhere. And just really
pushing the cops, huh? Did you have a radar too?
I don't know if I ever had a radar. I got about 20 tickets in my life when I was younger, and then
you should have had a radar.
I probably should have had a radar detector. Maybe I had one at one point, but look, I just got to this point now where, like, for me, it's like, look, I'm trying to get from point A to point B. What's the cheapest way I can get there? What's the most comfortable, easiest way I can get there? And I'm not really, and I don't think Tesla's future is high performance vehicles. I think that 2023 Compact is going to be the most comfortable ride you've ever had for the lowest price you've ever paid. And you're not going to care how high performing it is because you're sitting in the back seat sipping a drink.
That's amazing. What about regulation, though? I mean, we talked about regulation here with Bitcoin being a big, issue. You've already got much stricter rules for self-driving in Europe than you have in the United States. I think China is probably the most lax out of all of them. But, regulations can tighten very quickly. All it takes is one oopsies. What's your take on that?
So I think what you're going to see is different jurisdictions, sorry, I sound like a lawyer. Different locations will adopt the technology earlier or later. California's traditionally an early adopting state. Florida, it's already legal in Florida. It's already flat legal. Wow. The robotaxi network is already legal in Florida and protected. They're both legal in Florida and protected from local government regulation under state law. This was adopted last year before, signed by Governor DeSantis. Florida legislature did a great job. I've read the bill. You're not going to be able to stop it in Florida. And unless the feds step in somehow, which I think is unlikely. Sure. And then, California, I agree with you. China will be very pro. And what I see happening with this technology, like a lot of other technologies, like the Boring Company, if you want to talk about that, is you start in a location that gets a lot of tourists. And then people get to that location and they experience it. And once they experience it, they get home and they say, why don't we have this at home? And once enough people experience it in California, they go to Disneyland and they experience it. They go to Disney World in Florida, they experience it. They go to Las Vegas and they experience it. Once they experience that in a place where it's legal, they get back to New York, they get back to, Michigan will hold out forever because it's the home of Ford and General Motors. But they'll get over, and certain governments are more resistant to public demand than others. We say that democracies are better at responding to public demand. I'm not so sure that's true. But eventually it will succeed in Europe. And the fundamental thing is once it starts working somewhere, then it's just a matter of time. And, we've got, I'm a long-term investor. I'm not selling a share until 2030, if not later. So I really don't worry about the short-term bumps in the road. If they deliver full self-driving this year, next year, 2023, if you're looking at 2030, who cares?
Yeah. Let's see here. So I have this thesis that even though people look at Tesla stock and they're like, oh, it's already had its exponential growth, I look at Tesla as a company and I see them as pretty early on the exponential growth curve, or the S curve, as we say, that earlier part of the S curve, where we're still trying to, really ramp. Is it possible then that when we get to those autonomous vehicles, that's when the stock actually, or the company becomes more ubiquitous, and then that's when we actually see a real, like, the most insane exponential ramp of this company's value that we've ever seen before, where we'll look back in one day and go, this used to be a sub $1 trillion company and it's like 5 now or something like that. What's your long-term take on that?
Well, there's the short, like we talked about 2022 before. Suppose in 2022, in 2020, they delivered 500,000 cars. My ballpark for 2022 is 2 million cars. So if they 4x the number, and the revenue, just the revenue on that 200 gigawatt hours of batteries at $500 a kilowatt hour. Hang on. The revenue on 200 gigawatt hours of batteries at $500 a kilowatt hour works, or $600 a kilowatt hour, works out to $120 billion in revenue. That's a 4x in revenue in 2 years. Yeah. At some point, Wall Street has to recognize, gee, this is growing faster than we thought. What happens when you look at the Wall Street analysts is they say, well, what was this quarter like? What did they do last quarter? What did they do this quarter? Maybe we'll look at next quarter, right? Maybe we'll forecast next quarter. And it's hard to get a Wall Street analyst to look at next year, the year after, and so on. And to get a Wall Street analyst in January 20 or February 2021 to look at the year 2022, it's impossible to get them to think about that. But so ultimately, they have an implicit estimate of what's going to happen in 2022. If the revenue 4X's in 2022, and you're looking at it saying, wait a minute, they've already got plans to 4X this again in the next year or two. At some point, you have to recognize this is growing a lot faster than I thought. And I think the ultimate question is, and this is the thing, retail investors like me are making a killing because Wall Street keeps suppressing the stock. Sure. Right? This I personally believe, like, it's currently trading around $700 a share. I don't think $3,000 a share today is a crazy valuation. It might be $5,000 a share. If you think it's going to be worth $20,000, $40,000, $50,000 a share or more in 2030, what wouldn't you pay $5,000 a share for something that's going to be worth $50,000 a share in 9 years?
You think it's going to be worth that much, huh?
Yes. Potentially. Look, a lot of things could happen, right? There's all kinds of things that could go wrong. They might not succeed. If they don't succeed in the battery plan, my model is dependent on them delivering the battery plan the way they've described it. It's not even dependent on self-driving, by the way. Even without self-driving, you get to crazy numbers. You add self-driving and the numbers go like wild. But just on the battery numbers alone, if you do the math on what 6 terawatt hours means in terms of revenue, and then you figure margins are high, you just get to insane numbers without even getting into the self-driving side of it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose even just trying to look at the next few years, we've got a couple more factories opening here this year, Austin and Berlin. Even if they produce nothing this year because delays are common, which could lead to more hiccups in the stock, which could be buying opportunities. In 2022, I suppose you're right. In 2022, we'll have 4 facilities up and running. Shanghai should be producing 1 million. Fremont should be getting to 700,000, if not 1 million. And then you've got probably at least on the first full year of ramp, well, at least 250,000 cars at each of the others.
I don't
breaking
think
2 is possible.
I don't think Shanghai and Fremont are designed to go that big. I think so. Okay. I would say it this way: Shanghai and Fremont are the first generation factories, and they're currently around 500,000 capacity. I could see them going to 600,000 or 700,000 each, maybe, and it might be a stretch. Okay. Austin, Texas, and Berlin, I think, are geared to go to 2 million, and they probably hit their full stride in 2023. But if you figure 1 million between Shanghai and Berlin, between Shanghai and Fremont together, and then 1 million between Berlin and Texas, then you have 2 million vehicles in 2022.
There you go.
I still think that's a little optimistic, but I think you're getting there. But what's really going to be exciting is the 2023 vehicle, because Elon talked with Sandy Munro in an interview recently. And basically what's going to happen is the next factory after Texas and Berlin is going to be the next generation factory where you make the entire frame in 1 gigapress casting in 3 minutes. You go to 48-volt wiring, which is designed in a way that it's able to be installed by robots. You go from 1,000 robots making a vehicle in the Model 3 in Fremont to 200 or 300 robots making the compact that's coming, and you go to a much smaller footprint. The battery cell factories are like the battery cells. What they're doing, I don't know if you caught this. The Fremont battery cell line they developed is now the 10th largest in terms of production, the 10th largest battery cell line in the world, and it's in a corner of a building. It's
Right.
It's not even all. I think it's like the second and third floor, one corner of a building, and they're going to build 10 or 20 of those lines. I think they're going to build 10 lines in Berlin, 10 lines in Texas. I'm not sure what they're doing in Shanghai. I think they're going to build them in Shanghai as well. And you're going to see this and the cost. This is another thing that the reason the growth is so fast is it used to be you had to build a factory to produce the stuff, and then you got to build another factory to produce more stuff. And what's happening is they're shrinking the footprint of the next factory. They're shrinking the capital expenditure to build the next factory, and they're increasing the productivity of the next factory. So you're building a smaller factory that costs you less money, that makes twice as many vehicles or 3 times as many vehicles. And that transition, and it's like, well, once you've got that, well, now you build a lot of them. Right? Yeah. That's why you're scaling. It's like we've come up with a process that will make ultimately 400 watt-hour per kilogram battery cells in volume, in a smaller footprint that costs us less to make and costs us less per kilowatt hour. And once you get below the 100 watt-hour per kilogram threshold, you've got a very with high 300 plus watt hours. So once you get $100 per watt hour in kilowatt hour in price per cell, and once you go down this road, what ends up happening is it will sell in insane volumes. It's so useful. It's so much more useful. You've driven the cost of a vehicle, the EV, down below the cost of an ICE vehicle.
Right. And the cost parity breaking point there makes this very, very attractive.
And you're facing effectively unlimited demand. Not really unlimited demand, but effectively you will not be able to produce enough of these things to satisfy demand for years. Right. So you scale as fast as you can to meet demand. And people can't. It's hard for people to come to grips with that.
Why, when Sandy Munro was talking about the 48 volt wiring architecture, which is really like an Ethernet standard, like a PoE, power over Ethernet, which I think is great. I mean, I've run Ethernet, and it's very functional. Power over Ethernet, I think, is an incredible technology. It had very little understood, I feel like. Why? I mean, isn't that going to cause issues though, going from 12 to 48? Parts wise?
I don't think that's a serious problem. The key advantage is the 48 volt wiring. I believe the key advantage is number one, it's thinner wiring, and it's less weight. And then I think there's something which I'm going to say right now, I don't fully understand it. There's something about using the 48 volt wiring that it will make it easier for them to have robots put it together instead of humans. That's actually counterintuitive to me, so I obviously don't get it. But there's something about what they're doing with 48 volt. In terms of the usage of the 48 volts, I believe there are a lot of I don't think it's that big of a hurdle to make things 48 volt instead of 12 volt. I believe there are a lot of applications already that are 48 volt. Right. And it's, Tesla does a lot of stuff in-house. If nobody else will make it, Tesla will make it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, in theory, you could just use the Ethernet infrastructure. You could use Ethernet cables to wire the entire frickin' car. Which sounds insane, but
that's over my head. I thought the idea was you can use power over Ethernet, but the 48 volt is an advantage either way. Because you use less current, you can make the wires thinner. But we're pushing my engineering knowledge at this point.
No worries. That'll be something that I'm interested in looking into. So we'll take a look into that more. So why, in the commercial vehicle space, we just had a big slam on the EV market when the United States Postal Service decided not to give Workhorse the battery electric conversion contract. Instead, they went with Oshkosh, which basically is saying and I'm making this number up, but based on their statement, it kind of seems like the majority of their vehicles, 60, 70, 80%, probably going to be regular ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine, instead of battery electric. Is this just a sign that we're still so early in the EV space that we're not at cost parity yet for these commercial applications? And is that potentially an opportunity for Tesla, where it's like, hey, the technology's not there yet. We know it's coming. Load up on the stock.
I think we're early in the sense that the manufacturing capacity just isn't there yet. And no one is able to make EVs, especially like batteries. No one is able. There's a battery shortage, right? Tesla has its supply of batteries. A lot of other EV makers are struggling to get the batteries. I would almost say it could be irresponsible to do a large fleet order of vehicles for a company that can't demonstrate it's got a source of batteries. So But that's scaling. That's one of the things that needs to scale. That's why it's so important that Tesla's making these batteries at scale. That's why it's so important that CATL, LG Chem, and Panasonic are scaling. I think people don't realize. It's funny. We talk about Tesla and other EV companies. There's a ETF called LIT for lithium that is invested in the battery space. And I bought. I have a small holding in that. It's not a big holding because I've said so much in Tesla that I can't have a big holding anywhere else. But that's a really interesting space. And I don't know enough about it, but my understanding is that basically if you make high-end, high quality battery cells in volume, the margins are also very high. I think they're talking about maybe 20 or 25% margins for the battery cell makers because until it's a commodity. When you have like the high-end version, you're able to charge more for it. And Tesla makes its margins on the vehicles that it's using the batteries from. They're willing to give their cell suppliers a good margin to encourage them to expand, right? Tesla's goal is we want you guys to make as many batteries as possible. We're going to help you make them. We're going to share our technology with you. We promise we'll buy everything you make and we'll give you a good price because Tesla turns that to even bigger margins on its vehicles and its energy products.
I always thought that was very interesting with Tesla, that they're very open to giving away their IP, their intellectual property, just to get the whole industry moving already.
Yeah, well, but especially with the battery suppliers, we'll give you this is my speculation. My speculation is they are helping the three suppliers deploy the 4680 cell format, which the 4680 cell format's not hard. The size is not hard. LFP cells are already made in larger sizes, but the tabless design that enables things that reduces the heating and it's a technological advantage that I can't I think I understand it, but I can't. Apparently, I can't say it in a short way. There's features about the way they're manufacturing batteries, and they're sharing that with them. But the deal is, we'll take as many as you can make, and if we can't use them, then you can sell them to someone else. So there's no harm in giving away the tech if they're only going to make stuff for you, and I think that's going to be 3 to 5 years.
And I found that interesting about, for example, like. At NIO talks about this, pseudo or maybe half solid state battery that they want to start using in 2022. It seems to me like, because they're not they're not manufacturing their own batteries, so it seems to me like they're really just taking an allocation maybe from some developer. But it just seems like all of these companies are just going to be fighting over battery allocations, whereas Tesla's just, look, we want what you got, but we're also just going to run our own line here. Doesn't that give Tesla a massive, unique advantage?
Yeah. No, it's a huge advantage. And it's also, if you're on the supplier side, if you had a chance to sell batteries to someone else or Tesla, you sell to the biggest dog because that's where you're going to get your most volume. That's why everybody wants to sell to Walmart, even though Walmart gives really, really crappy margins, right? So the suppliers don't make a lot of profit on their sales to Walmart, but they get a huge volume. So if you're a cell supplier, you would want to sell to Tesla if you could. The other thing you mentioned solid state, and I'm up in the air on solid state. I think that, first of all, anybody talking about solid state in 2022, 2023 is just talking fiction. There's no solid state batteries yet. And QuantumScape, maybe 2026, we're going to start making batteries in volume. But there's a problem, which is if the lithium iron phosphate cells that are not very energy dense are good enough for Tesla's low-end vehicles, and the high nickel cells they're making, the 4680 cells that Tesla's making themselves, are good enough for semi. How good does solid state have to be? On the one hand, how much better energy density does it have to deliver, and then can they deliver the cost? Because the real value Tesla's getting out of its batteries is really cost per kilowatt hour. Its solid state is fantastic, but it costs 3 times as much per kilowatt hour, and no one's going to buy it. It's going to have very limited applications to, like, maybe airplanes. Right, which is not nothing, but that it's a real issue there, and I haven't seen yet anybody. It's still fiction. Solid state batteries are until somebody actually delivers a working solid state battery cell that they can produce in volume. It's fiction. It's nice. It sounds like a great idea. I hope it happens. I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla delivers it before anyone else. They're probably researching it too.
Oh, you can almost bet they are. Yeah, that's actually interesting. There was so much QuantumScape euphoria when they went public. And one of the concerns that I had was you get a battery tested, a lab tested single layer of solid state, never placed into any kind of actual battery yet. I personally thought they're at least out until 2024. Sounds like you're even more bearish on that, and you're saying 2026, huh?
No, I think QuantumScape's own projections were they were going to start producing in volume in 2026. That's not me being bearish. That's what they said. Maybe it was, I think it was they were going to start producing and even 2027, their volume was probably less than 10 gigawatt hours, which is less than the current Tesla cell line in Fremont today.
Sure. You know, and I think that's what's so interesting too, is it's almost like when people think of Tesla, which is my largest holding as well, they look at Tesla and they say, well, I mean, Tesla's already run so much. Other companies are going to catch up. Yeah, the glory days of Tesla are over. You know, am I crazy for thinking, you know, and I keep adding to my Tesla shares, am I crazy for, like, am I just being blind here that maybe Tesla's just at the beginning, that even if other companies catch up to where they are now, Tesla's going to be 2x ahead of them in a few years?
The way I say it is people are always looking for the next Tesla. The next Tesla is Tesla.
Yeah.
I mean, no, and it's plain and simple. If you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, I think this company is going, look, they're going from zero. I think they probably used about 50 gigawatt hours of batteries in 2020 as a ballpark number. Maybe it was 25, something like that. If they're going to go to 6 terawatt hours in 2030, well, that's a really big, that's like a 100x jump, right? So why wouldn't the stock 100x? You know, if you're going to, and you know, then the question is, you're in 2030. You mentioned the S curve, the exponential S curve. I think the question is, when does the curve bend back? And I think the curve might start bending back in 2030. But I'm not certain that it will. I think we're still going to be on the steep part of the curve as we're approaching 2030.
That's a good point. Yeah, because at some point, the market will stop pricing in at least some of this future growth that we're seeing now. I think one of the biggest complaints that people have for Tesla stock now is, oh my gosh, but Yahoo Finance says the price to earnings ratio is moon. This is insane. I think it's really...
Can I just address that? Can I just address that?
Yeah, please.
So I bought Amazon in 2013. I believe the price earnings ratio was negative, or, you know, it was insane. If it was infinite or insane or whatever it was, they didn't have a great year in terms of money. They never made a lot of profits until sometime after 2013. And I just realized I was addicted to Amazon Prime. So I bought Amazon stock at 12x, right? You know, price earnings ratio makes sense for an established company, you know, and focusing on that makes sense for an established company that's growing at a steady rate. When a company is growing really fast and not making its profits yet, and the profits are in the future, which is a real challenge with these startups like Lucid, like we're going to make these profits in the future, but it's really, really speculative. Yeah. I just looked at Amazon Prime. My story with Amazon is I realized I was addicted to Amazon Prime. I was checking the store every day. Every day I was like, what can I buy? And it's like, wait a minute. And I just sort of said, well, wait a minute. If I'm addicted now, then, and I'm an early adopter, and the other people are probably going to get addicted. And it wasn't just Amazon Prime. It was also AWS, which I didn't know that much about. But those two things together really drove Amazon stock high. And, you know, that's, you know, but somebody who's focused on price earnings ratio would have said, oh, you can't buy Amazon now. And they would have missed the 12x.
Sure.
When would you buy a growing company? Yeah.
I think you almost have a little bit of this issue of, you know, Warren Buffett in his book, The Snowball to Wealth, and even in his other research on that, he's always looking for, I just want the Coca-Cola, you know, give me that reasonable price to book value. And really, I mean, I hate to say it, but in some ways it feels like Warren Buffett has kind of missed the how to value maybe these really, really high growth companies, because you can't use PE today. Maybe you could use PE if you go project, okay, well, maybe I'll give it a reasonable PE in 5 years or in 6 years or something like that. Yeah. You know, that also makes like discounted cash flow impossible on these high growth companies, because how do you predict an exponential value for this, or an end value for this, a terminal value, excuse me. And so, I mean, really, what's your process for valuing these companies? Are you trying to figure out what I think revenue will be in the future and take a margin and work it backwards like that? Or what's your process on these?
So my process in general with Tesla, and I try to extend to other companies where I can, is I sort of look and say, okay, where do I think this company is going? Not looking at stock market fund, you know, you see people looking at charts of, you know, this is the high and this is the low. I don't look at stock prices at all. I look at, okay, what is this company producing? Where's the potential growth? Where could that growth go in the future? And I'll give you an example. Something I haven't invested in yet, but I've thought about is Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, Memphis Meats. There's this space where the possibility for alternative meat. And I've eaten the Impossible Whopper. I've eaten the Beyond Burger. I believe that they're actually, For me, I'm not like one of these picky eaters. My wife thinks I don't know how to eat. I have no taste in bagels and pizza, right? I'm kind of like, I won't eat Domino's, right? But most pizza places that are mom and pop pizza places make pizza I like. Most bagel places, I like their bagels. But some people are really picky. Well, that's not like my Long Island bagel from before. People are picky that way. But for me, the burgers, the Beyond Burger, the Impossible Burger, they're already there. But they're not there in pricing. But if you look at the size of the global meat market, and if you look at their story about where they think this could go in terms of reducing the cost of producing meat and reducing the environmental impact and all this stuff, and basically, if they can get to the point where they can deliver quality meat for less than what we're paying now for regular meat, the sky's the limit. So the question is, the challenge with those companies is I'm not sure who's going to win. With Tesla, it's like, okay, we already see who's going to win. So I think any company you want to look at and say, well, where could this company go in the next 5-10 years in terms of producing, in terms of what products they're going to make? Are these products people are going to want? Is there potential to make a profit on this? And then, so that's what I do with Tesla primarily, is I just model that out. I'm looking at the Boring Company and Neuralink, two of Elon's startups. Think about this one, Neuralink. I don't know if you're familiar with Neuralink. It's Elon's brain implant company.
I watched the Piggy demonstration.
So imagine 10 million people spending $10,000 a year. 10 million people with brain diseases spending 10,000, which is probably low, right? Well, that's a really large amount of money. 10 million times 10,000. Now take it to the next level and say, well, what if it's 100 million people, because it becomes like a commodity and they upgrade every 3 years, right? And you can really see where that scales. So if I could invest in Neuralink today, I'd be investing in Neuralink today, because I think that could 1,000x, 10,000x. Boring Company has 1 mile of tunnel in Las Vegas that's about to be operational. I think they could have hundreds of miles in 1,000 cities each.
Yeah, but let me ask you about this. The Neuralink thing. I'm sorry, the Boring Tunnel. I agree with you on Neuralink. I agree with you on, well, I imagine I agree with you. You haven't mentioned it, but I imagine we have a similar opinion of like SpaceX. Regarding Boring, though, an issue that I have is I think that robotaxis and eVTOLs will make the tunnels completely unnecessary. And tunnels rely on the government. While I think tunnels are a great idea, getting the government to allow us to drill under every city and every dense space, I don't know if I see underground being the future compared to the air. Can you comment on that?
Sure. Actually, that's funny, because I've been saying that the Boring Company tunnels and Hyperloop will make eVTOL obsolete. No, if you think about it, the future. First of all, I don't think it's a real challenge to persuade governments. You could if you look at Tesla, at the Boring Company presentations in front of the Las Vegas City Council and the Clark County government, they're like, well, when I was a town board member in my town. I've been to a bunch of local meetings where people are presenting projects, and it's usually there's like 3 or 4 board members asking all these questions, challenging. Well, what about this? What about this? And the Las Vegas meetings are like, well, when can you start?
Of course, Vegas, though. I mean, come on. Vegas will do anything to get people to come to Vegas.
No, there was a councilman. He's like, look, you're going to reduce my commute from 30 minutes to 12. When can you start? You look at the practical value of the Boring Company tunnels. Look at Miami. The Miami mayor went nuts. There is a proposed project. It's called the Brickell Tunnel. It's supposed to be there's a Brickell bridge they're going to replace. Maybe it's Brickell. I'm not good at this.
It's all right. No,
I live an hour away and I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sure you're right and I'm wrong. But the Brickell Tunnel, you can look it up. They have a 2017 PDF where they're going to spend about $1 billion doing tunnels. And Elon said, I could do that for 30 million. And the Miami mayor's like, what? Wait, what? And he's
wait a minute. Look, the Miami mayor is also the guy who's paying his employees in Bitcoin. And Vegas is Vegas. I mean, the two examples here, I agree with you, but they're either at the frontier of the future or of crazy, right? Well, forgive me for saying that.
Let me be clear. I think most governments are clown shows. It's more obvious in some places than others. I'm sorry, but I mean, look, the 2020 was a really good example, and 2021 is not changing perceptions that much, that government in general is a clown show. So, Las Vegas, they're just not afraid to show it. Miami, Florida has Florida, man. We're just used to, we're used to our governments being clowns. But the practical reality is, if you had a tunnel project that was going to be $1 billion, and I read the report of what they were going to do for the $1 billion, and Elon says I can do that for 30 million. If you know the math on the Boring Company, if you run it, and this is the same thing I said before about robo-taxis in a tourist location. The thing about Las Vegas is, if you do it in Vegas, there's a lot of tourists coming in, they get to experience it, and they say, wait, this is really cool. In Vegas, they're already about to expand it to 24 miles. So if I'm a tourist and I fly into the airport and I ride this thing to the casino, and it's free because the casino's paying for the ride, right? And I get there like that. I get home and I get out of the airport and I'm like, do I take a cab? Do I take an Uber? Am I taking this ugly bus? I got to go to this parking lot to get to my car. All these hassles. Like, it's not going to take long before a lot of tourists who go to Vegas and Orlando and, and wherever the Boring Company tunnels are, Austin, Texas is going to have them too. They're going to say, why don't we have this at home? They're going to start pounding their local representatives. And in a fairly short amount of time, they're going to demand it. And the same thing I was saying about battery factories and scaling up production. Once the demand is there, they're currently working on reducing the cost of tunneling per mile, the cost of building the tunnel boring machines. Once you've got it down, then you build this is the shirt I'm wearing, the machine that builds the machine. You build the machine that builds the tunnel boring machine, and you start spitting out 100 of them a year. You start spitting out 1,000 of them a year. And now you're doing projects all over the world. And China's going to adopt this. China is going to love the Boring Company tunnels. You talk about governments. What government is forward thinking that way? China will love this. You'll see Boring Company tunnel projects all over China.
Wow. That's interesting. So no on the electric VTOLs and bullish on the tunnels. So what's your opposition to the VTOLs? Is it doesn't have the battery tech? I mean, look, with the tunnel, I can go to point A to point B. Somebody somebody gets stuck in the middle of the tunnel, the whole tunnel's screwed. At least that lane of the tunnel, right? I have no idea.
We have a world of tunnels now. How many times have you seen this happen?
Okay. Well, I mean, you like a regular car tunnel when
the Great Tunnel Traffic
accident?
Jam of 2027. I don't remember the Great Tunnel Traffic Jam of 2014 that slowed everybody up for 6 years. I mean, we had the Lincoln Tunnel and New York City has tunnels that back up all the time. It's just because of the volume of traffic. It's I think the scenario of tunnels getting shut down is kind of unlikely. Look, airplanes get shut down by weather.
Fine, fair. The argument is that with an eVTOL, you have the freedom to go wherever you want, and you're not even potentially restricted by some idiot who gets out because he wants to tour the tunnel. I'm just these little things are things. Americans want their freedom, and isn't that kind of like? I mean, why would I not want to fly around and go to whatever parking lot I want rather than travel to the start of some dumb tunnel? I'm sorry. It's a great idea. I'm not trying to call it dumb, but and get out the other end and then go where I want to go.
Let's be clear. The tunnel is dumb. Okay. The tunnel has no intelligence. There's no chips in it. It's just a tunnel. The airplane is smart. The airplane is smart. It's got chips in it. It's got, it's probably using AI to fly. It's the problem with VTOL that I see is what's the cost per passenger mile versus the cost per passenger mile of the tunnel. And I think it's a great billionaire's toy. I don't know. Listen, Elon loves the idea, right? Elon has been saying it's got to be at least 10 years now that he has this design for an eVTOL, and he's waiting for 400 watt hours per kilogram to be able to deliver it. So if Elon believes in it, I'm not saying it's not. I'm like I don't want to say I'm the world's biggest Elon fan, but I'm close. And if Elon says it, it's probably true, at least in the long run. But I just think the market space, you figure short haul trips, robotaxi, regular loops are probably going to be good enough. You won't need a short haul airplane flight. Continental, New York to Los Angeles, that type of travel, a Hyperloop's going to get you there supersonic. eVTOL is not going to be that much faster. It's going to cost a lot more, and it's not going to be as safe. True. It's not no matter what you do, flying is not going to be safe as the tunnel. Intercontinental, now, unless you do my crazy idea of the Bering Strait, which we won't go into unless you really want to.
Through Russia.
Yeah, you go. He wanted to. What do you think he wanted to talk to Vladimir Putin about on Clubhouse? I think he wanted to talk about the Bering Strait. That's my fantasy. I'm probably
bridge
crazy.
Alaska. So Sarah Palin could actually see Russia then.
She could just take a short ride over. So, but the Starship point to point, which is something I'm still like. It doesn't make sense to me. The Starship point to point will work. That you'll have a Starship leaving Los Angeles and landing in Shanghai in 30 minutes. Right? The intercontinental travel will be Starship point to point. I don't see a lot of space for an eVTOL left. And it's like, okay, the billionaire wants to go to some remote location, sure, but most people want to travel from big city to big city or near big city to near big city. And the Hyperloop gets you between big cities, and then the loop gets you to your immediate destination, or a robotaxi gets you to your immediate destination. And the space for an eVTOL, I think that the market for that ends up being small if Hyperloop works. And I think Hyperloop is probably a no-brainer. So it's easier to deliver that.
Fascinating. Yeah. I mean, well. First of all, yeah. I mean, the battery tech is going to be a big weight on the eVTOL industry. Personally, I don't think we're going to see those until, certainly not mainstream, even if they were cost effective until like 2030. It's kind of like a hydrogen for me. Do you want to touch on hydrogen? Your thoughts on that? I mean, there's so many people that think hydrogen's the big thing for semis, and here you go, Tesla's doing 5 car battery packs shoved into a semi to go electric. I haven't
seen a market yet for where hydrogen makes sense. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. I just haven't seen it. My impression is that there's an efficiency problem. The cost of creating the hydrogen, once you have the hydrogen, it's a very efficient fuel. It's a little bit hard to store because of the size of the molecule, and when you have to store it in a high pressure container, it takes up a fair amount of volume. But the problem ultimately is the cost of creating the hydrogen is high. And so just getting light from the sun and putting it in a battery ends up being much more efficient than getting light from the sun and then taking water and getting hydrogen out of it and then putting it in a hydrogen storage tank. That cost gets a lot higher. And then I think the step of taking the hydrogen and making it run, if you have to convert it to electricity to make the vehicle run. There's 2 steps in that process that make it much less efficient overall. I can't say that it won't work. I can't say there aren't applications where it won't work. I think in general, it's not that good. I do think VTOL, I think there's a window for VTOL, just to give you some hope on VTOL. I think it's going to take 10 or more years to get Hyperloop running in a lot of places because you got to dig a lot will tunnels. And I think eVTOL might be 5 years away before the battery tech. I think we're going to hit quality. The battery tech will reach the level needed in 2026 or 2027. And I think there are people who are already making eVTOLs. So once you get to that point, but then the window shuts down in 10 years after the Hyperloops are all built. 10 or 15 years. So there's a window there where it works. But if you're building a plane and you're expecting it to last you 30 years, you're going to be really sad when the last 20 years it's not really useful. It'll still be useful, but it won't be cost competitive anymore.
I guess I'm just trying to think of this myself. Like if I were, here I am an hour outside of Los Angeles. I hate driving, first of all. Driving is the reason I bought my Tesla in 2017. I'll never forget that experience. Just a quick note on that. It's just, I remember in 2017 thinking, wait, there's a car that can actually drive itself, on the freeways and that. I'm like, I don't care how much it is. I'm buying it. That's what I thought in 2017. But anyway, it's been so incredible. But anyway, so I'm trying to picture myself. If I'm an hour away from Los Angeles and I'm going to take my family, we're going to go to Los Angeles for a day. We're going to go, I don't know, visit the Hollywood Stars and look at the sign or whatever you want to do, go to Santa Monica and stuff. Why would I take my family and go to some tunnel terminal and then sit on this whatever with a bunch of other people and then get to the other end? Or maybe I'm sitting in a robo-taxi that's doing it. When I could just float over there,
Sure.
and go park in any lot I want. What am I missing?
So I think the answer is that you and I live in a different world than the average human. Okay. You and I probably have more money than the average human. And there's an awful lot of people who, if they can save $5,000 a year by doing it this way, if they can save, $100 a day, $1 a day. If you think about the robotaxi world, like if you go to India and Egypt and Africa, you get a robo-taxi down as cheap as I'm talking about. It will still be too expensive for the average middle-class person in India, Egypt, wherever, and for homeless people in America. So the question is, if you're trying to serve the bottom 50%, which is a large portion of the population, and maybe you're trying to serve the bottom 80 or 90%, cost matters a lot. It matters a lot. It matters a lot. It matters a lot. And if you are not delivering if there's a really, really low cost, why do so many people go to Walmart? Do you go to Walmart? I mean, Walmart is not a pleasant shopping experience, right? I mean, I do go to Walmart occasionally, but it's not a pleasant shopping experience. But there's an awful lot of people there. And there are probably people who aren't going to be buying an eVTOL jet. There are probably people who aren't going to be buying a Tesla Model S. They're going to be happy to ride in a robo-taxi that's going to take them from point A to point B and take the hassle from. This is the thing, like when we talk about robo-taxis, the thing that people don't get is, what if you never had to go to a gas station again? What if you never had to change the tires? What if you never had to buy new tires? What if you never had to replace windshield wipers? What if you never had to get an oil change, replace the muffler? What if you never had to worry about parking again? All the
Right.
things that what if you never had to buy car insurance again? What if you never had to sell a used car again and buy a car and go through all these things that we deal with? And instead, you just look at your phone and say, I need a ride. You step out of your house and it pulls up. It drops you off at the front door. When you come out, you don't have to go out in a parking lot and search for your car and scrape ice off the windshield or get into a hot car. All of it is a seamless experience, and it saves you $5,000 a year, right? Now, for you or me, okay, the $5,000 a year isn't that big of a deal. But for the woman who cleans my house, it's a big deal. Okay, there's a lot more of them than there are of you and me, and that's the challenge when you think about this.
That's a fair point. That's a really fair point, because really, and this is almost the mission for Elon. Look, he's got the Plaid Model S and the X. He's gonna eventually one day we'll have a Roadster, but those aren't for the everyday person who just wants to get from point A to point B in reasonable safety and comfort. Therefore, the people who want maybe the toy. So maybe is there a future where you go to Tesla.com and everybody's doing the robotaxi, the tunnels, or the $25,000 cars, and then hey, you want to spend $500,000 on the EV? Here you go. It's an option for you, but it ends up being a niche product that sells a few thousand units a year or something like that.
Yeah, I just don't think Tesla's going to bother making it. I think it's a great idea.
They're not even going to bother. Okay.
I mean, I don't want to say no, but he said no. He was on the Third Row podcast, and Gali, you just had Gali on. Gali is like all over the eVTOL, and he's bugging it. You got to do an eVTOL. You got to do an eVTOL. And Elon's like, there's the regulatory environment. He was saying the regulatory environment's really hard for eVTOL because you have all these different jurisdictions, all these other issues, and
Sure.
He only has so much bandwidth. But I think there are other companies that are already making eVTOLs. I think it's just fundamentally a question of what's an important use. I'm a believer that Elon is the most important person in the world, okay? Because he's making our lives better in so many different ways. Do you want him to invest his time in making a toy for billionaires? Or do you want him to invest his time in making our lives, to solving brain disease and getting us and making us a multiplanetary species? I think somewhere around 2027, 2028, Elon cuts back his time at Tesla and devotes himself full time to Neuralink. And he won't have to spend a lot of time at Boring Company because it doesn't require the same level of commitment on his part. But he will go all in on SpaceX, and he will go all in on Neuralink in 6 or 7 years. And that's where you really make life better for all of humanity. If you're able to deliver the things he's talking about there, it is inspiring to the future to create a colony on Mars and solving brain diseases and helping us interact, improving our productivity. Think about it, you're walking around with this phone, right? You got this phone and you're walking around with it and you type with your thumbs and increasing your ability to communicate. People are like, oh, that will make us the Borg. We're already the Borg. We're already the Borg. We're already addicted to these things, right?
Yes.
But it's just that we're not very good at it yet. And we'd be much more productive in the Borg if we have a Neuralink in our head. And I have Alzheimer's in my family, and I'm looking at, 25 years from now, it's going to be, I got a 50-50 shot of getting Alzheimer's, right? Just based on my family history. So if you're going to tell me in 10 years I can put a chip in my brain that's going to forestall or save me from Alzheimer's, I'll pay a lot more than $10,000 for that, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, wow, good argument, man. Wow, and I have to agree with you too. The regulation argument on the eVTOLs. It's just sort of an anecdote here. In 2016-ish, 15, when drones were getting popular, I started offering that as a service, as a real estate broker, as drone photography and video photography.
That's a big thing now.
Yeah, definitely. And I ended up getting my FAA license for this drone work, so I could do commercial drone work. That was the most ridiculous and hardest test I've ever taken in my life. I've done licensed contractor tests, licensed lending, real estate agent, real estate broker. I've done many of these tests. It's usually a joke. You do your flashcards and they're fine. This was basically a dumbed down pilot's test for me to fly a stupid drone. I had to go to an airport and read maps and all this stuff. I mean, I passed it, but I'll tell you, and then every 2 years you have to renew it and take the test again. And I'm like, that's the regulation for drones. This is insane. Now, connecting the dots here on the eVTOLs, I can't imagine it's going to be any bit easier. Well, that's a good point.
The AI flying the planes will be smarter than you and me.
Yeah, that's true.
It will be good at it. And no, that's actually a really interesting thing on drones. I saw this, Kathy Wood from ARK Invest was talking about in her big ideas. She talked about drones I think there's a really interesting question about food delivery from like restaurants.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And other product deliveries. Will they be done by drones flying from the warehouse to your home, or will they be done by robo-taxis? I think that's an open question. I don't know the answer. I think that robo-taxis will make more sense. Or maybe it's a mixture. Maybe some applications, like, you want your food fast if it's coming from a restaurant. Maybe a drone delivery will get your food there quicker and faster, and it'll still be warm, versus a robo-taxi. I'm up in the air about which one's going to win that battle.
I would love to get restaurant delivery from a drone because I'm tired of my French fries coming home cold.
Yeah. I mean, think about that, because I think they estimated the cost of drone delivery would be like a quarter, a dollar maybe.
Super low. Yeah.
So if you're able to deliver, that makes McDonald's, normally you would think, I don't want to get delivery from McDonald's because it's, it's cheap food. It's cost too much for the delivery. But if it's going to cost let's say it was $1 and you got a $10 meal from McDonald's, you're not going to care about paying $1 for delivery if it's going to come fast and the fries will be fresh.
Yeah, I think that's solvable. I mean, realistically, a lot of people have decently enough sized backyards. It's certainly not if you're at a condo complex, you would have to have some kind of like roof drop box, which is possible. Most of the condo complexes have flat roofs with access up there. You put lockers on the roof. That's actually probably easier than even backyards. But I imagine that's all very solvable. Heck, I mean, now that I think about it, condo complexes could be the perfect way to do it on roofs.
It'll land on your patio. It'll just fly right to your patio, drop it on your patio. Yeah. No problem. Yeah. That's not going to be an issue.
No, yeah. And they already have blade guards for these drones where they put the shields on so they can't chop you in the face, So, yeah, I think you're right. Those are all very solvable issues. Okay, so, but I wanted to go back to this Beyond Meat comment that you made. I have a little bit of a concern with these, that food is like the most low margin thing that exists. I mean, it's horrible. Plant-based meats, you have high sodium content. Maybe we're not there yet on the ingredients nature. How do we, why bother investing in plant-based foods when you can invest in Tesla, something that's high margin?
To be clear, I think the space is, I put the plant-based meats and the lab-based meats in the same category. I think they're the same alternative meats, I would call it. I'm not convinced. Well, I think the problem is who's going to win. And I think there's one scenario is one company solves it and they become the dominant company. Another scenario is one company solves chicken, one company solves beef, another company solves pork, another company solves fish. And you could end up with many different companies it's one of the things I don't like about Impossible and Beyond is I think they're trying to do too many different products. Like just do one and get it right. Do one, get it right, and scale that one. And once you've scaled that one and you've done it well, then move on to the next one. But I mean, I'll be honest, I love sashimi. If somebody delivered sashimi, because that's a huge issue, by the way, with fish, is we have this problem with overfishing and the danger the danger to fish. So if somebody, I think the environmental gain, the societal and environmental gain from doing it is huge. I think the difference, I would disagree with the margins. If you watch Ethan Brown and I forget the other guy's name, Nathan Brown, Impossible Foods and Beyond Meats, if you watch their CEOs and the Memphis Meats guy on YouTube, I saw his thing. The potential to deliver this in the long run at lower cost, which would increase margins, is really high because you're using 97% less land, you're using 97% less water. I'm making up the numbers. It's somewhere in these high 90s, 97% less energy. If you're able to make it work and you're able to do it with so much lower cost, and then you can scale it, you've got to get it right. And I, like me personally, I think Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat, both of them, I think their ground beef is already there for me. And here's the question. It's like, I've got friends who are like, well, I got friends who are really picky about their steak, right? They're really picky about their burger. I'm not. Yeah. Well, same thing I said before about, you and I we can afford to have a much more expensive vehicle, but there's a lot of people, if you're going to save them a little bit of money, for the bottom 50%, if you can deliver it at lower cost than what the current cost is, and it's close, that you're going to sell. And think about how big that market is. How big is the global market for meat? Is it $1 trillion? Is it a 10? I don't even know. I can't even wrap my head around how big that market is. Because, if the average person spends $100 a year on meat, and there's 7 billion of us, it's a big market. Maybe we spend $1,000 a year on meat. The market's insanely large. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I guess I just, if we go mass market with food, anytime we've gone mass production with food, the margin goes in the toilet, and these end up being these companies. Like, I guess we just haven't maybe in my opinion, we haven't seen that potential there. Maybe like what we see in the EV space, but maybe I'm too doubtful on that.
I think it comes down to this: if somebody gets good at one particular meat and they get market share, then if you're another guy who's working on a meat product, you say, well, let me shoot for a different meat. He's doing ground beef. Let me do steak. He's doing steak. Let me do chicken. Let me do fish. If everybody gets to the point where we're getting really good at this one particular thing, I think there's potential for a lot of companies to succeed. I'm not saying it will break down that way. I just think it could break, and the whole thing might fail too. That's the other thing. The whole thing might fall apart. But things like you're eliminating the use of antibiotics in the process, which is really important for humanity. You're eliminating unpolite concept, but you're eliminating feces in the production process. You're eliminating E. coli in the production. You're saving so many uncleanliness things and environmental benefits to it. And it doesn't seem like they're that far away from getting there. I just don't know what the next steps are for them to get there. So I would encourage anybody. I made a video Beyond Impossible about this. I didn't cover the lab-based meats, and I don't know enough about the lab. Kimball Musk, Elon's brother, Kimball Musk, is invested in Memphis Meats. I don't think I think Impossible Foods and Beyond Meats are ahead of the lab-based meats right now in terms of getting to market. But I think it's really going to be interesting to see where these companies go. And I think we probably need to wait 2 or 3 years to see where it breaks out. It's not. It might, and also they're priced really high. That's the other problem. I think it's Beyond is traded publicly, and the share price, the stock valuation is really, really high, and it's hard to justify that when you're in the speculative stage. But if you haven't tried it, go see if you can try a Beyond Burger at a local restaurant. We have a restaurant called BurgerFi in Florida. They have it. I thought it was pretty. Of course, I had mine with bacon added. So
good.
When somebody comes up with
bacon on anything, man, come on.
if they deliver a quality plant-based bacon, it's over.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so I want to ask you about Musk. He's hinted at like therapeutics and genomics. Is there anything real there?
Well, they're doing something is it called CureVac? Tesla makes a device to help with the Moderna vaccine, I think. I always remember I always used to say nuclear fusion was always 10 years away. It's always 10 years away. I think genomics was always 10 years away, and now I think it actually moved up to 5 years away. I think it might be 5 years away for another 10 years. But I think we're making progress. I personally, there's different people have different opinions. I'm not impressed with the vaccines that they've delivered using mRNA technology.
Really? Why not?
It's a conversation we probably don't want. I think the public press on the vaccines is very strong. I think if you look at the critical side of the vaccines, it's not very strong. I could give some specific examples, but just on the whole, I'm not persuaded that this particular vaccine technology is there. I think the promise in the future is very, very bright. But like I said, I think it's 5 years away, and it's going to be 5 years away for the next 10 to 20 years. It's really hard to tell when it's going to cross that line. And I don't know if you remember back, we talk about genomics. A while back, they were talking about proteomics. It's like, okay, it's not just genomics, it's also the protein. So there was this proteomic space. Yeah. And I think that we're getting close and we're making a lot of progress. It's just, you never know when you're actually there until you get there. You think it's right around the corner, and then there's another problem. And humans are messy. We're not easy. Same thing with neural networks, and we're making progress on AI, but I think that artificial and general intelligence is going to be a little bit further away than we think.
I think that's fascinating what you just mentioned too, because one of the things that's really, as much as I love the idea of genomics, and when I read about the CEO of Moderna talking about how they can inject like a cassette, something into a mouse that turns its thighs into glow in the dark thighs.
Yeah.
Like, blows my mind, right? But one thing that I kind of look at the human as almost more complicated than government. And both of those make me very nervous, because I feel like we are just scratching the surface on how nature works and biology works. Certainly there's no rhyme or reason as to how government works. And it's one of the reasons I like Tesla so much, because it's like, I get it. You make a machine that stamps the car, right now in many pieces, in the future in fewer pieces. Okay, many pieces to fewer pieces, more profit. I like it. I think people misunderstand Tesla who don't drive Tesla or who are still buying traditional cars. I'll never buy another traditional car in my life. Will always be something like a Tesla for sure. Maybe it'll just be Tesla forever. To me, that just seems easy. It's like simple. Like why would I not put a ton of money into this, right? Yeah. The other ones, I'm not there yet. Maybe it's too speculative for me. Maybe they're like NFTs, where I'm like these non-fungible. What?
Yeah, I haven't figured that one out yet. There was some NFT with like basketball highlights. And somebody, I think it was JJ Redlich was talking about. JJ Redlich has a great podcast about the NBA, and he's a former Duke basketball player. He's a 3-point shooter for now the New Orleans Pelicans. I probably hates being called a shooter, but he was talking about NFTs, and they have this new NFT where you get basketball highlights. He's like, "Can I watch that on YouTube? Can't I just find that highlight on YouTube?" Yeah, but it's an NFT.
You gotta own it. You got to own a share of it because maybe somebody one day will pay you more for ownership in that highlight.
Yeah, but apparently that's a thing in the NBA. It's like, I guess up to 2 weeks ago, nobody in the NBA knew what it was, and now all the NBA players are talking about it. So maybe it's going to be a thing. I don't know. I don't get it yet.
Well, I think anybody with some social media following is addicted to this idea, and I think it's Logan Paul's fault. Did you see what he sold?
I missed
so apparently he created a digital piece of art, like a digital card, and then created a non-fungible token, which people were able to buy. I think it was like 3,000 shares of it for, an Ethereum a piece or something. It generated like $3 million in the span of a day, just selling ownership in this digital art. Which in theory, tomorrow he could just create a new piece of art, and the next day he could create another new piece of art. And people are buying ownership in this, thinking it's going to go up in value. And I think maybe it'll go up in value short term, but just give me Tesla shares, man. I don't know. Call me simple.
Well, maybe I should stop selling T-shirts and start selling NFTs. I guess. You should sell
digital representations of your T-shirts.
Yes, that's. Yeah, it may be like this is one of those things where like it doesn't make sense to me, but that doesn't mean it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Just because I don't get it.
Fair way to put it. Yeah. Okay, so I gotta ask you. I know you're very bearish here, but we gotta at least have the conversation about Lucid. Tell me why you shouldn't hedge some of your Tesla shares with Lucid shares.
I just think I don't see Lucid as a viable company. I think first of all, I called it in September. They had the reveal. I was looking forward to it. I was excited about it. I wanted to see another company succeed. The market for EVs is so big that Lucid or Rivian or whatever, they're not a threat to Tesla. Sure. It's great to have more EVs coming in. And the reveal was just terrible. I was very, very disappointed in it. And ultimately, it came down to technology. And if you look closely, if you look closely at their technology, for example, it was a lot of marketing fluff. Actually, they lost me at Wonderbox, right? One of their key pieces of technology is the
Wunderbox. It sounds German, so it must be good.
It sounds like what you folks need is a marching band. It's just like, no, I'm sorry. You lost me at Wonder. They probably lost me before Wonderbox, but so they have said that the Lucid Air will deliver over 500 miles of range with a 2.5 second 0 to 60 time, and they're going to start delivering them in the spring. Right? That was what they said before the merger, and I called it. They can't deliver that car because they can't deliver those specs. There's no way. There's no way, because here's the thing. You believe in Tesla. I believe in Tesla. Very simple question. The Tesla Model S long range has 412 miles of range and a 0 to 60 time of 3.1 seconds.
Right.
You're telling me this company that has never made a car is going to make a car with 100 miles more range and a faster 0 to 60 time. Do you believe that Lucid has better engineers than Tesla? Because you have to believe that. I have this argument with people. I've been having this argument with people over and over again, and they're like, that doesn't mean they have better engineers. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. It does mean they have better engineers. We're not talking about 10 miles more range. We're not talking about the same range. We're talking about 100 miles more range. I just don't buy that story. And I knew they could not deliver, because the minute they deliver it, no one has test driven one. Jay Leno drove the Cybertruck. Elon let Jay Leno drive the Cybertruck. No one has driven a Lucid Air. No one outside of Lucid. I believe that 90+% of the employees at Lucid have not driven the Lucid Air. There's a small select number of employees who have driven the thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if the one that they show off on the racetrack or whatever is a Tesla Model S with a shell on it. I would not, I can't prove it. But I would not be surprised if that's the case. for them to deliver. And if you watch that video closely, you can see they took the rear seats out, they stripped weight, they did everything they could to make that thing work. So
Wow.
I just, but plain and simple, when you come down to what happened is January 18th, or February 18th, I said they will not deliver a car this spring. They've been saying we're going to deliver cars this spring. We're going to deliver cars this spring. I said they will not deliver a car this spring. And it's for this: the minute they deliver a car and driver, road and track, and Motor Trend will drive it. And they will say, gosh, this isn't 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds. Gosh, this isn't, this doesn't do 500 miles range. This isn't even doing 300 miles of range. They can't release the car if they don't meet the specs, right? Because their whole story collapses. So I predicted 5 days before the merger. I didn't know the merger was coming, but 5 days the merger, I predicted they're not going to deliver a car in the spring. A week before the merger, the CEO is on Fox News saying we're going to deliver 6,000 cars in the spring. We're going to deliver 6,000 cars this year. We're going to deliver cars this, and I called it. I've been criticizing it for a while, but I think I 5 days later they do the SPAC merger, and an hour after the merger, we're pushing production, not just deliveries. We're pushing production. They said they were already in production, right? They were already in production. He said that Alan Mulally drove the first production vehicle off the line,
right? So
you're not producing. So they pushed production the second half. Their now forecast for 2021 is 577 vehicles. It's an odd number to say they delivered 577 vehicles.
It's under 6, yeah.
And then you look at their forecast going out to 2024, I think it is. They say they're going to deliver 90,000 vehicles with $9.9 billion in revenue. That's an average selling price of $110,000. And I will just ask you, and I'm not saying I know the answer to this question.
Yeah.
What is the market for vehicles over $100,000? What is the total addressable market over $100,000? It's not that big. And that's another thing, the reservations. He told Jim Cramer, Mad Money, he told him we have a bulging order book. When this document comes out with the merger, this slide deck came out, they said they had 7,500 orders totaling $650 million. What that works out to is ballpark, they have 6,000 orders for the cheap one, the $80,000 one. And they have 1,500 orders. And they're not orders. They're like deposits, right? They're not really orders. They're like reservations that are fully refundable. They have about 1,500 orders for the higher end vehicles. 1,500. They were supposed to produce 6,000. They've been pushing this thing. They've been pushing fluff. They had this big reveal. They've been doing all this stuff, and they only have 1,500 reservations for the cars they're going to sell in 2021. How many Cybertruck reservations are there?
Yeah,
1 million, 2 million, right? I mean, it's not comparable. This is not, we're the next Tesla. Well, the next Tesla is a Cybertruck. The next Tesla is the compact. They're nowhere close. So the promises they made before the SPAC merger, and this is kind of an important thing. I'm not a short-term investor. I'm a long-term investor. People who bought CCIB in the week or two before the merger, and they paid $50, $60 a share, those people got burned really bad. And they got burned in part because of the lies, and I'm calling it lies. You might not agree with me that they're lies. Peter Rawlinson had to know a week before the merger that they weren't going to deliver 6,000 vehicles in 21. He had to know they weren't going to deliver vehicles in the spring, and he continued the lie when people were buying stock in CCBIB, knowing that the rumors were out there. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a shareholder lawsuit. I'm not that kind of lawyer. I don't know that kind of area law. It's an opinion that this sounds like a good case to me, that part of the reason for the stock collapse was that they pushed back deliveries and they pushed back their promises. And if you believe he was lying a week before, that's a material lie. In my opinion, I'm not my area law, not an expert on the field, but I and if he lied to you then, when is he going to stop lying to you? It's like if you're lying to me now, how do I ever trust you? But
that's true.
But the world of the stock market, look at Nikola. How is Nikola not trading for zero?
Well, that's a good point too.
It was such a whopping. There's nothing there, right? Is there anything there? What are people buying when they buy Nikola stock? What is there? Is there something there? What are you buying in it? What is there a cash pile? Maybe there's a cash pile. I don't know what the value is in Nikola. There's no product. Is there a product? Is there even a
good point? There's a prototype.
But that's what I'm saying about the people who are short-term investors. I think they're looking at, I'm looking at, the stock is moving up, the stock is moving down. There's real potential for it to trade in this band. I'm going to make some money. They're like, no, what's the product? What's the potential revenue for this in the long run? And the thing with Lucid is they through the transaction, they now have a $4.5 billion cash pile, but they're going to burn through it. That's another. It's called pushing it to call it a lie, but Michael Klein in the investor call. Some people say you should watch Michael Klein in the investor call. So I watched the investor call, and Michael Klein said that the cash pile that they have will carry them through 2022. No, it won't. Sure. Look at your own slide deck. You're going to go through You're going to go through $5 billion of cash in 2021 and 2022. You're not going to make it to 2023. That $4.5 billion isn't enough, and that's if you actually sell vehicles in 2021 and 2022, right? I'm gonna make a prediction now. Okay, they said they're going to deliver 577 vehicles in 2021. Yeah. I really think they're not going to deliver any vehicles in 2021 because of the same thing I said before. They won't have the specs. But my prediction is they will not deliver more than 100 vehicles by the end of 2021. And sure. I was correct on the 18th when I said they won't deliver vehicles in the spring. I am very, very confident, and I will be shown up, right, if I'm wrong, at the end of this year. So probably, I don't know how many people watch your channel. I think it's a lot more than watch my channel. And there's a lot of Lucid people who hate me. Not just the company. I mean, there's a lot of Lucid investors who hate me for sure. my criticisms. You can come back to me and say, look, we delivered 101, and I'll say I was wrong. Right.
And look, I mean, Tesla has its delays as well, right? I mean, the
sure.
Cybertruck was supposed to come out this year. It's probably not going to deliver any cars this year. Maybe it'll deliver a handful, whatever. In part, that is par for the course with vehicle manufacturers. I do agree with you. I think the big thing that they need to do now is where these even the test vehicles that they say they're producing, or let's get some people actually behind the wheel and driving these things. I think when that happens, which I do think will happen, but I think when that happens, that'll be a good catalyst event for Lucid. I agree with you. The SPAC process, it's a bunch of marketing fugazi 90% of the time. Very dangerous. SPACs should be regulated much more than they are, especially those marketing pamphlets they do, which are a complete joke and a lie, in my opinion, for every company, even the companies I believe in. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. I want to know, though, would you invest in like a NIO or an Xpeng? They're actually producing their vehicles.
So I just want to follow up on one thing you said. Mm-hmm. Peter Rawlinson said that Alan Mulally drove the first production car and he loved it. Fine. Okay. Let Dan Neal, the Wall Street Journal, drive it. Let Car and Driver drive the same vehicle that Alan Mulally drove. Let Car and Driver, Road and Track, Motor Trend, let them drive it. And then if you're claiming that this was such a great vehicle and he loved it, then let somebody outside the company drive it. And then let Dan Neal do a report on how great it is or how great it isn't. But you asked about NIO. I don't know as much about Xpeng. I do know a little bit about NIO. NIO is pinning itself on this battery swap process, which I think is dumb. Yes. And the specific problem, and no, it's I think this will be obvious in a 30-second explanation.
Okay.
How much does it cost to build a battery swap station? How many Tesla superchargers can you make for the same amount of money? Right?
I have no idea. Yeah.
So I'm going to say it's probably easily 20 superchargers. What's the throughput? So I agree the battery swap is executed in, let's say, 5 minutes, and the supercharger takes 30 minutes. Okay, let's say that's the rough ballpark. So how many vehicles how much throughput do you have with 20 superchargers versus one battery swap station? Right? You're going to have, let's say, you're going to have 3 times the throughput on a 20 supercharger place than you are on a single battery swap place. So that's one problem. The other problem is for the battery swap, you have to have a lot of extra batteries, and there's a battery shortage. You have to have however many vehicles you have coming in, you got to have more batteries sitting there waiting. Those are batteries that aren't in vehicles. And then the third problem is what Tesla has shown with Battery Day is the structural battery pack is the future. You can't swap a structural pack. So it doesn't work. And if you have constantly changing technology, then the swap station becomes obsolete really fast.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because I think a lot of people, when they initially think of battery swapping, they think, oh, well, I mean, one battery in, one battery out. But then we forget the fact that if there's a line of 20 cars coming to a swap station and a station has 20 batteries, well, now you've just taken all the full batteries and replaced them with dead batteries. The 21st customer who's coming up, sorry, station out of order. We have 20 dead batteries. We got nothing for you. So I think a good point.
There's a surge problem, but it really comes down to this, and I don't know the answer, but I'm pretty confident, having looked at NIO's battery swap technology, that's an expensive thing to put in. And Tesla just opened or just announced that they're done with their supercharger factory in Shanghai that's going to produce 10,000 superchargers a year. Okay. How many of these battery swap stations can you deploy? How many superchargers can Tesla deploy? Well, if Tesla's going to, let's suppose it's a 20-to-1 ratio that the battery swap is comparable to 20 superchargers. You got to deploy 50. Is it 50 or 5? You got to deploy 500 of these battery swap stations to compete with 10,000 superchargers. I don't think they're, the challenge of scaling the swap station is another problem. There's too many problems. Now, with all that said, I think NIO makes a good vehicle. I think they're making a competitive electric. I'm not saying it's competitive with Tesla, but and this is another thing when people talk about competitive EVs, and even if it's Lucid, I don't care if you're competitive with Tesla. Tesla can't make enough cars to satisfy the market. The real test for any EV is, are you competitive with the comparable ICE vehicle? So the Mustang Mach-E is a vehicle that I sat in. I watched it. I watched a professional driver driving it at the Sebring International Raceway. That is actually, it's probably my favorite non-Tesla EV right now. Wow. And I have some questions about it, but it is a very, very nice vehicle. I've seen a lot of people talk about it. I sat in it, great vehicle. I watched Blake Fuller is the guy who won the Pikes Peak Challenge in a Performance Model 3. And he said it's the best Ford he's ever driven. Now, this is a guy who, as far as I know, he has no incentive to lie. I wasn't on camera. Best Ford I've ever driven. That's a pretty big statement. So it's better than comparable ICE vehicles. So that's good enough. The question for Ford is, how much does it cost them to make that? Because they're selling it for, let's say, $50,000. If it costs them $100,000 to make it, you can't scale that. Can they get to the point where they can make the Mustang Mach-E for $40,000 and sell it for $50,000? That's real potential, right? And I will say this: like, I'm a Tesla nut. People think I hate all other EVs. Mustang Mach-E is pretty good. That's a pretty good vehicle. Porsche Taycan, not something I want. Porsche Taycan, pretty good vehicle. I'm pretty impressed with the Porsche Taycan. Little pricey. Doesn't have quite the range, but great if you want a high performance sports car, you can't, Porsche Taycan's pretty good.
So on that note, would you invest in Ford as something to balance out your portfolio?
Not yet, because I don't know how much it costs them to make a Mach-E. I need to know how much it costs them to make a Mach-E. If they're making the Mach-E for $100,000 a piece, you can't scale it. That's true. If you're losing money on every one and you make it up in volume, it doesn't really work. You got to get to the point where you can make it in volume. And does Ford have the battery supply? Wasn't there just an article in the papers the other day that Ford doesn't have the battery supply? That they now need to
all complain about not having the battery supply.
Right. Yeah.
So really Tesla heavy here. Any other stock? What's this other 15% of your portfolio?
It's primarily S&P 500 ETFs. My second biggest individual holding is Amazon. I think Amazon, so there's the rational side and there's the I don't know. I think they're both rational. One side of me is I should invest everything in Tesla. Yeah. The other side of me is no. I used to believe in having a balanced portfolio and you shouldn't have more than 5% in any one stock. So now that I'm 85% in one stock, I've definitely gone past that. That ship has sailed. But I guess it comes down to this. I could be wrong. Right, I could be wrong about that. So it's an Elon saying we're always wrong. Their goal is to be less wrong. I could be wrong about Tesla, so it makes sense to have other investments. But Amazon, I think I have McDonald's and Coca-Cola. I sold my Facebook. I believe that Facebook is done. That's a long conversation. Not that it's done like it's going to go zero, but I think their growth. I think their growth is done. I actually bought 2-year puts on Uber and Lyft because of Tesla.
Gosh.
Which is that's a gamble. I didn't put a lot of money in it, but
when did you do that? Because they've been kind of cheap lately.
No, isn't Uber trading at $100 billion valuation?
I don't know. Well, I guess maybe I'm still stuck in recovery mode, thinking during the pandemic they sold off heavily. I think they've recovered pretty well over the last bit here.
Well, the stock has recovered. Businesses haven't recovered. They're losing money. Yeah. They shrank. And I am a fan of Uber and Lyft. I think Uber and Lyft are great. I use them. I think they're great. When I travel, I take Uber and Lyft all the time. I think they're great. They provide a great service. I think they save lives. I think they reduce drunk driving. I have a friend who goes out drinking, and he takes Uber when he knows he's going out drinking. I think it's a great thing. But the robo-taxi model is going to destroy Uber and Lyft. They will not survive. And so the Uber and Lyft story is, well, we're losing money now, but we're growing and we're going to grow into profits. Okay, that's credible as long as you can keep growing. The minute a robo-taxi network goes live somewhere, let's say it's Los Angeles, the minute it goes live, it starts taking market share from Uber and Lyft, and their growth story evaporates. Instantly. And then it doesn't take long for a thoughtful investor to say, okay, well, if they stop growing in California and they stop growing in Florida,
done.
They're going to stop growing everywhere. Now we have a company that's losing money and shrinking. And that's a zero. That's a zero.
If I had to choose between opening my Tesla app and ordering a robotaxi, or some random Uber who is potentially going to talk to me, probably going to talk to me, I'd rather take the robotaxi. I don't want to talk to anyone. Okay.
I've had very good experience with Uber and Lyft. Not to say I've never had a bad one, but overall, I think they're great. I don't mind my children riding alone in an Uber or Lyft.
How old are your children?
Right now, 15 and 19, or 16 and 19. But when they were 13, it didn't happen. But I personally did not. Girls.
Wow. Okay.
But I personally did not. I think that Uber and Lyft they're safer than a cab, right? You know who the driver is. There's a record of the whole transaction. I mean, is there a potential for a bad thing to happen? Yeah, but it's safer than a cab. It's safer than a municipal bus. It's safer than the New York subway. What's the big deal? It's safer. It's safer than your kid walking down the street. I don't understand. People are worried about it. So
probably safer than them riding with their friends as well, because people, high schoolers go nuts.
I think the one thing that saves one of them, and I think it's Lyft. I think there's a danger to my investment in Lyft puts. There's a danger that Tesla buys Lyft. That when the story happens, when you're implementing the software to do robotaxi, there's probably knowledge that Lyft and Uber have about where customers want to be picked up. There's some data that they have that's probably valuable in the operation of a network like that. Not in terms of the drivers, because you're not worried about drivers anymore, but some inside information about how the network works and where traffic patterns are. There's some value there. I'm not sure it's worth billions, but it might be. I could see Tesla saying, "Hey, we'll pay $5 billion to buy Lyft," and just so we get their data, we get their employees and the knowledge, the institutional knowledge that they have from running that network. I could see that happening, but not when they're at a high valuation. It's when the value starts to drop at a certain point, Tesla swoops in and picks them up.
Right, even just maybe for their mapping technology of here's where the driver is, here's the the peak surge pricing should be over here, and we probably have algorithms for determining where peak pricing is or whatever like that.
Yeah, it may be they can get most of that by buying a former Lyft employee. That may be enough.
Well, we probably won't get the AI data though, unless you think they can click in a USB drive and download it all.
No, they're not. They won't do that. But I think the data alone might be valuable enough that it would be worth it. And Lyft probably has enough, and you wouldn't pay 20x for Uber. The data that Lyft has is probably good enough.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So really big here on Tesla. Wow. When's Tesla gonna ever deliver their Roadster or come out with like a van or something like that? Any thoughts on that?
I'm really stoked about the van. So I see first of all, we're always wrong. I'm probably wrong about this, but what I see is a platform probably in the same dimensions as the Cybertruck in length and width. So it's something that can be both a van, like a cargo van or work van, a minibus that'll seat like 20 passengers, 30 passengers in countries where people are poor, and an RV. Like you could do all of that on the same platform with basically the same rough shell. And the minibus concept, which Elon talked about the minibus in his master plan part 2. I say part 2, but I don't know if I get the French right. Part 2. But in that master plan, he talked about a minibus, and he had this design, and he sort of laid it out. And I think you're going to see that come. And the minibus is going to seat like 20 people. And the reason why that matters, we talked before about you and I ride in comfort, and we expect a certain level of experience. But poor people are going to want something that's going to save them a lot of money. The cost per passenger mile, not the price per passenger mile, but the cost to the provider per passenger mile gets well below a penny. If you have, think about this. Let's suppose current Model 3 costs 10 cents a mile to operate. All costs, all in costs. If you do this minibus thing, and it's 20 cents a mile, so it costs twice as much for this thing to operate, but you seat 20 people in it, right? Well, now you're down to a penny a mile. Now you go to now maybe you're able to get that cost down further. Now you go to the third world and they cram 30 or 40 people in. If you've ever seen Indian mass transit, some of these countries, people just cram in, or you design it with smaller seats. You may be able to cram 30 people in, and you're getting the cost per mile down below a penny. And now you go on a 500-mile trip, and it's $5. And we pay $10. The customer pays $10, but it's a 500-mile trip for $10. Think about think about this for a second. Okay, I live in South Florida. a lot of people in South Florida like to go to Disney World. Disney World it's a 3-hour drive. Okay. Yeah. Now suppose we put a boring tunnel from South Florida that pops up in downtown Disney, or Disney Springs, I think they call it now. And it's a 150-mile journey, and it goes 150 miles an hour. So you get there in an hour, and it costs $5 each way. Right. I don't have to stay in a hotel anymore. I get in the minibus in the morning. I get out at Disney an hour later. I walk in. I'm good. Maybe it even drops you off inside the park. Who knows? You got a special pass, right? And I'm there in an hour. I'm good. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what time I stay till midnight or whatever it is. I hop in a thing. I'm home. I sleep in my own bed. I go back the next day. Right. And
that's not a bad point. Unless you're in the water table, I'll have to figure that part out in Florida.
No, I have a video on that. I talked to a Florida geologist. There's no problem doing tunnels in Florida.
What? Do they just, how?
It's a common misunderstanding. It's not, it's
okay,
rock.
Please
it's rock.
Tell me.
It's rock.
Do they just go down deep enough to the rock or what?
They actually have to go down deep enough to avoid the sinkholes, the sinkhole risk.
Right.
But the Port of Miami has a tunnel. Okay. There's tunnels in Florida. There's tunnels in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is, I think, 23 feet below sea level, and there's tunnels in the Netherlands. It is a popular misconception, and I had an interview. I talked to a Florida geologist. He said, no, that's not a problem. Any tunneling you're going to do is going to have its own set of problems. Different kind of rocks, different kind of whatever. There's different things that you have to deal with, but it is not a serious problem.
Limestone versus whatever.
Limestone versus granite. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
then Florida's pretty limestoney, I think.
Yes, it is limestone. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So you're really just going down deep enough to avoid any of that.
Do you want to talk about Starlink? I think you might like my Starlink take.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so SpaceX, for those who don't know, SpaceX's work is developing a network of satellites that will deliver internet basically anywhere on Earth, and in particularly valuable to people who live in rural areas and people on things like cruise ships and airplanes.
Cruise ships. Oh my gosh, internet on cruise ships, man. You got me right there.
So basically they're going to put up a network. I believe ultimately it's going to be 44,000 satellites is the current proposal. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes higher than that. I think the current proposal is 12,000. There's a second proposal to go to 44,000. And I believe they're going to be able to serve in the ballpark of 100 million people with this. And 100 million people will be paying $100 a month, or basically about $1,000 a year. So you do 100 million customers paying $1,000 a year, you've got $100 billion a year in revenue. So that's pretty good. And the cost of launching the satellites probably cost somewhere between $100,000 and $250,000, $100,000, $250,000. I think they're going to get them down to $100,000 a piece. The launch cost right now, they launch them on a Falcon 9 rocket. They launched 60 satellites. I think the cost of a launch to SpaceX is probably around $20 or $30 million. So it works to be about $50,000 a satellite to launch it, plus $100,000 for the satellite, $150,000 per satellite. Skip forward to Starship. Starship is doing a test flight probably in a few days. It's going to start launching Starlink satellites into orbit. It's going to launch 400 at a time. And the cost per Starship launch is going to be down around $2 million a launch instead of $30 million a launch, which means the launch cost on Starlink is going to drop down to around $5,000 per satellite. So you end up with, and then every 5 years you have to replace your satellite. So you got to replace 44,000 satellites every 5 years, or 8,000 a year at $100,000, ballpark $100,000 a piece. It works out to something like a $2 billion a year cost to keep your satellite network flying. Okay. And then you have other costs on the ground. I don't think they're that high, right? You're actually providing your own backbone on the satellite. So you're not even paying as much for internet backbone on the Earth. So maybe it's $10 billion a year in expenses and $100 billion a year in revenue. So so when people they just did a fundraise, right? They just raised $850 million at a $75 billion valuation. Let's just say this. If Starlink has a potential for $90 billion a year in profit, right? I don't think this is crazy. Cut it down to $50 billion a year in profit. Say I'm crazy. Cut it down to $50 billion a year in profit and give it a price earnings ratio of 30. It's a $1.5 trillion company. And that's just Starlink part. That's not even the SpaceX part, right? So, and they just paid at a $75 billion valuation. Right, so those investors are going to 20x.
As a revenue multiple. You're thinking. So not like a net earnings. You're thinking gross, huh?
No, I'm saying if it's $100 billion in revenue and it's $10 billion a year in cost.
Okay.
And that's a $90 billion a year profit, but cut it to 50, give it a 30x on PE ratio, which is probably low, and you're at a $1.5 trillion valuation just for Starlink. I'm not sure what SpaceX is worth. I'm not sure how much profit there is in flying to Mars. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
a profitable enterprise or a money-losing enterprise, but Starlink is very clearly, assuming they're able to get over the hurdles, assuming they're able to make it work. There's always questions, but those people who just bought in at a $75 billion valuation, they're looking at a potential 20x.
Jeez. Yeah. Getting the allocation on that would be nice to be able to buy into that, right?
And I believe there are ways. I don't think there's any opportunities to buy Boring Company stock or Neuralink stock. I believe I'm working on the idea of creating some kind of VC fund to pursue that, but that's like speculative. But I believe if you go on Shares Post or Equity Zen or something like that, I think on some of these websites you may be able to buy SpaceX stock, and you're going to pay you're not going to get the same price those guys got. You're going to pay a 6% fee here and a 2% fee there, and you're going to get if
pay a premium.
Yeah, you're going to pay premiums here and there, but you still might be able to get into SpaceX if you look hard. I haven't done it. I haven't persuaded myself to make that jump, but because it's just like I just bristle at like, wait, you're going to charge me how much to do that? I can't do it. But I think
that's a good point.
I think like if I were to invest in something else other than Boring and Neuralink, SpaceX, I'm like all in on Elon. I'm like I said, I'm a big Elon fan, and it's not just because I and this is another thing. Like people will say, well, Elon this, criticize Elon. So look, heroes have flaws. They're not heroes if they don't have flaws that they have to overcome. All heroes, every hero story except for Galahad. Galahad was the flawless hero, which is one of the weird things in Arthurian literature. But every hero, Superman, it's kryptonite. Bruce Wayne has these dark thoughts or whatever. There's all these, issues with our heroes. Yeah, he's flawed. He's not perfect. He makes mistakes. He's over optimistic. He says goofy things, but he delivers. Okay. And it's spectacular. And where he's taking us, where he's strapping us on his back, and he builds a team to actually. It's one of the biggest things is think about the Tesla team. If you watched Battery Day, watch Drew Baglino. If you watched Autonomy Day, watch Andre Karpathy. He gets the best people, and he says, "All right, let's do it." And then he encourages them and he helps them. And if they're not sure about something, and this is the other thing, I mentioned Facebook and Amazon. I'm a big believer in founder-run companies, visionary founder-run companies, and keep in mind, Apple lost Steve Jobs and Apple continued to do well after that. But
true.
I'm a big believer in founder-run companies, and, visionary founders take their companies a long way. And he is the most visionary founder we've ever seen. And, he gets down to the nitty gritty. Watch the interview with Sandy Munro and watch Elon talk about the material science behind the aluminum alloy and the single frame casting and the 48-volt wiring. Find me another CEO who can talk in that depth about brain implants in one company, rockets in another company, manufacturing in a third company, and tunneling in a fourth company. And then while we're at it, let's talk about VTOL jets. This is a guy who's
and flamethrowers.
And not a flamethrower. No, and you do start to wonder, is he really human? Like maybe he's Mr. Scott come back from the future to give us transparent aluminum.
Maybe he's already got his Neuralink, Who knows?
We're going to get to Mars and he's going to be, there's going to be a whole bunch of people look like Elon sitting there. Oh, you're home.
Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. Wow. Well, this has been an amazing discussion. How can people follow you and learn more about your perspectives? I've really appreciated your insights.
Oh, thank you. So I'm on YouTube, Warren Redlich. Just Google Warren Redlich or go on YouTube and search for Warren Redlich. And I'm on Twitter at WR4NYGOV. I was the 2010 Libertarian candidate for governor of New York. So that's why it's WR4NYGOV. Warren Redlich for New York governor. I'm no longer running for governor of New York, though. Just to be clear.
Are you done with politics?
My wife says so.
Okay, so maybe you still have some ambitions. You want to take over California?
No. Chamath can do that. Chamath's great. I'm behind Chamath. I'm on the Chamath train.
Very well. Oh, that's awesome. Super exciting. Well, I look forward to another discussion like this in the future. I love your bullish thesis on Tesla and Elon and your criticisms on others. I think you make very, very valid points. So thank you. Great perspective. Look forward to having you on again. Folks, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to share, subscribe. Warren, thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Definitely. All right.